p.m. Tuesday, August 9th. I'd like to acknowledge that the press and public were duly notified of the meeting in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. We have a roll call just to ensure a quorum.
Councilmember Hahn.
Here.
Councilmember Goshen.
Here.
Councilmember Anderson.
Here.
Councilmember Ward.
Here.
Councilmember Streetman.
Here.
Councilmember Popson.
Here.
Councilmember Myers. Councilmember Pierce.
Here.
Mayor Pounds.
Here.
You have a quorum?
Thank you. Any citizen comments, any signups? We got two special presentations. Our first one is a request for city-sponsored event status, Operation Heal Our Heroes 5K Run Walk on October 9th of 2022. We've got Everett Weston with us tonight. So Mr. Weston, the floor is yours. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Mayor. Nice to meet you all, council members. Thank you for your time today. We have one actually updated here. One revised timeline.
All right, thank you.
Just to briefly introduce myself, let me just open up this real quick. As Mayor Pounds mentioned, my name is Everett Weston. I'm the founder and executive director of Operation Heal Our Heroes, 501c3 that I founded, focused on the suicide epidemic. We lose about 20 veterans a day to suicide, which is the number signified on my back. One of those was a good buddy of mine that I served with in the military, who took his own life back in 2013 because of his inability to get help from the VA to be able to acknowledge his own issues, among a myriad of other challenges. And after Frankie lost his life, I made it a personal commitment of mine to try and do everything I can to stop further unnecessary loss of life among our veteran community. Since 2014, when I started this initially, a year to the day when we buried Frankie, I've thrown events in New York and Montauk, where I used to live for many years, in places like Tampa and Seattle, where there's been other areas where veterans have lost their life by their own hands, where communities wanted to get involved. And in each of those areas, I threw events to do just that, helping to synergize communities, both veterans and civilians alike, to help better orient them with the issues facing our veteran community, particularly as it relates to the awareness of mental health issues. All the funds that I've raised historically have gone towards funding private mental health care programs for veterans, so they don't have to get stuck on a 6-month waiting list to go see someone at the VA. They can go talk to someone immediately and get the help that they need to make sure that they're back on their feet. One of the things that I'm working to do, as this is just the first event of hopefully many that I throw in the Charleston area, having moved here about 2.5 years ago to the area. One of the things I'll be focusing on the next phase is veteran employment. Realigning folks with a task and purpose post-service is a very important piece of the puzzle to help ensure our veterans are set up for success post-service. So that at the core is what my organization is all about. The purpose for the briefing today is to walk you through a proposal for doing a launch event. My organization's been dormant for about 2 years in the pandemic. Just obviously not able to raise funds like we used to be able to do. But in terms of the relaunch, having spent last couple of years down in the IOP area in general, I wanted to propose a beach run for the community to begin getting involved again, where we can engage with both veterans and civilians alike. And that's what that is the basis for this proposal today. I've done this event. Basically, I built a blueprint for it. We did it in Montauk trail run for about four straight years from 2016 to 19. And so really taking all the systems that I've developed for that, just doing on an easier course in theory, which would be down by the beach, a little easier than a trail run. But that is the basis for the proposal here today to walk you through. So in terms of just briefly walking through some of the timelines, and certainly feel free to jump in at any point with questions that you might have. In terms of the actual event itself, some of the primary objectives to help better align local veterans with various support initiatives that are in this community. There are many great ones like the Warrior Surf Foundation, Low Country Veterans, Operation Patriots Fob down in Bluffton. A lot of groups that are out there doing great work, and my goal is to serve as that connective tissue to bring veterans out, help make their family and members and friends more aware of these great support services, and just canalize those efforts. As part of that, also enhancing local awareness of issues related to post-traumatic stress. This is just a major gap. People don't always know how to have these conversations with their loved ones that may have served, and so this is what I've done over the years is serve as a beacon to help guide folks towards where there is help, and then it's okay to ask for help, that they're not alone in these challenges they face. Objectives also certainly foster controlled, competitive, safe environment, focused on team building activities. We have support from the Ethos Athletic Center to provide trainers for some of the athletic portions of this, for oversight. And I've also spoke with Chief Cornett as well as Deputy Chief Hathaway about a support plan along the beach, just to ensure that we have safety in consideration at all times. And then lastly, promoting health and wellness to not just the community's attendants, but to the greater good of the population around. So I'll take a pause there for any questions or the event itself.
Everett, how many participants are you thinking that you would attract for this particular run that you're relaunching here, basically?
Yeah, so I would anticipate, just based on my organic community and some folks, different groups of people that I know down here, I would say on the low side, 100 in terms of race participants. On the higher side, I would say, just based on what I've done in the past, probably 300 would be a high end of that. That's if we have local gyms getting involved, sending teams to participate. Certainly, I plan to engage with the VFW next to the Windjammer, because later in the evening, after this portion, we'll be doing a concert event at the Windjammer as part of the fundraiser, and working with Scotty on doing that with and in conjunction with the VFW. So the VFW's engagement could drive that number up closer to 300.
And you mentioned local vendors. I know the Windjammer, VFW, both would be pretty heavily involved, with the launch of the run and the landing zone, the LZ.
Yes, sir.
Do we have other local front beach vendors that are interested in being involved in any way?
I hadn't proactively engaged yet. I wanted to make sure that, I had the blessing of the council first before I got people spun up on that front. But I would be doing that probably tomorrow.
Okay.
Hopefully.
Thank
Is there a date?
Yes, ma'am. So in terms of a date, we're looking at Columbus Day weekend. It is October 9th. So a Sunday, which was a little bit of an off day, just in terms of population flow normally, but it would be Sunday, October 9th. The timeline I've readjusted slightly from the initial deck that you all received. This is based on some good guidance from Norman Jean this morning about tides coming in at 7:43 a.m. on that day. Based on that, I flexed the initial points, which is the race setup, to 8:30 to give time for the tide to recede. And in terms of startup points, well, if we start to think about the end and the LZ as outside the Windjammer, we'd be doing a 2.5. Oops, excuse me. About a 2.5 click run up to the beach access point between 34th and 35th. That would be where the turnaround point is. So that's where we begin setup. That's where we would have a water point, aid station, and then begin kind of setting the course for the track back towards the Windjammer.
So you've coordinated with the rec department and what your plans are?
I've only briefed Desiree on this so far. I haven't coordinated specifically with the rec department, but certainly happy to on that.
Okay.
And he's also met with Deputy Chief Hathaway and Chief Cornett.
Okay. But how does that fit with our calendar, I guess is my question.
We don't have any events that weekend, and beach activity starts winding down this month. So in October, we don't anticipate having large crowds on the beach. That would be an issue.
How long would the event last, about approximately?
So the run itself, I would anticipate being over, based on historical events, it would take probably 45, 60 minutes max. For it to be, what's that?
Unless I'm running.
We do incorporate the walk aspect for those that like that, but military, that's a 15-minute mile, 3 miles, so about 45 minutes. But I would expect it within 60 minutes. I planned for 90 as the absolute worst case, but historically folks are done with the course within 60 minutes.
So you meet at the Windjammer by noon.
Correct.
Okay.
About 11:30 based on the prescribed timeline here. And then again, through the help from this group, part of the way that we help raise money through this is by kind of gamifying it with small teams. So we'll do a kind of a team relay competition outside the Windjammer on the beach right thereafter.
Other questions?
I have a general question. How much money do you raise on an annual basis for this cause? It's very worthy cause. I'm just curious.
So historically, we have been under the 250K mark in terms of our threshold. Usually that's through the course of about 2 or 3 events. Usually have been up in the New York general area or one other satellite one we've done. And then all the funds outside of our event costs then get distributed to mental health organizations that are providing that best in class work.
I guess the last question is, what are you asking from this? What are you asking from the city? I
Yeah,
guess.
so
is
we'll-
what we would-
Yeah, we're not voting tonight, but it's
Yeah.
asking it to essentially be a city sponsored event,
Okay.
which will involve police
Yeah.
and other folks. Jimmy?
Just had a question about your structure. Are you a 501c3?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Filing 990 tax return every year.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, sir. That's yes. We have that. I have that copy of that in the back of the document.
Well, total support. I'm a veteran myself, so
Thank you, sir. Which branch?
Coast Guard,
Roger that.
7th District. Coast Steadfast.
I was an Army combat engineer.
Okay.
What else, Mr. Weston, anything you want to share or?
I believe that are the main elements for the event. Again, funds raised will be going towards the next event down the road, as well as supporting these local groups in the area, Low Country Veterans, Warrior Surf Foundation, and then also anything that the VFW may need as well, if you look at help support their communities. So just in terms of the fund distribution, that's what we focus on. I think that is all I wanted to bring to the council's attention, pending any other questions.
Desiree, anything else from your viewpoint or
No,
chief?
sir.
I know y'all have had conversations. Good.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for bringing it to IOP.
Thank you. I
Appreciate, appreciate what you've done already. Next, we have the proposed CARTA budget for fiscal 23. We've got Daniel Brock with us. He is with the COG, BCD COG, regional strategist. So thank you for joining us. And again, we're not voting on this tonight. We'll vote on it at council at the end of the month. So.
Very
Take it away.
good. Thank you for having me. Tonight, my name is Daniel Brock. I'm with the Council of Governments, and it's that time of year again where CARTA goes out to each of its municipalities represented on the board to ask for approval of its annual budget. I believe you guys received a copy of that. So if you have any questions, I can certainly answer those. I did want to give you an update on the Beatrice Shuttle, which is certainly near and dear to the hearts of everyone here at Isle of Palms. It continues to operate very well this year as it did last year. We've seen 309 riders so far, with 9 service days left this summer. The effort to publicize the service has gone well. I'll give you a couple of stats here. Media wise, 34 mentions, 185,000 in the audience for those. And the value there was about $22,000, which basically doubles the amount of the service cost split between ourselves, the city and the town of Mount Pleasant. We put some money behind social media advertising as well. It's been viewed 150,000 times roughly, with 5,500 interactions with our post, people clicking, looking at videos, and those sorts of things. Our promotional partners have been great. ABC News 4, Trooper Bob, who seems to be everywhere. We got him on a bus. He was kind enough to work with us on that. The CVB has been involved in promotion, as well as his town center, which really this cannot be done without, as they allow for the parking on the land side there. So it continues to move forward. The awareness, I believe, is there. The utilization, again, could frankly be better, but I do believe it remains an important regional connection for the public transit system, allowing everyone in the region to be able to reach one of our local beaches. And thank you all again for your partnership on that this year, along with the town of Mount Pleasant. So any questions? Happy to answer this.
Yeah. With all that advertising that you just mentioned, why don't you think more than 300 people use that? I mean, we have 20,000 visitors on a weekend here. And if only 300 people use that from the very beginning of the year, it's not impressive.
Sure. No, I mean, you would love to see more people do it, but I think it goes to a bigger issue about behavior modification. I don't think a lot of people are familiar with really taking their car to another mode of transportation than coming to the beach. There's probably a little bit of apprehension in terms of bringing items on board and materials, which is overblown. In fact, we've had families come with all of their gear, families of 4, small children. That's been fine. But certainly single individuals, couples coming out as well. Operationally, it works great. I think it's a perception issue among folks that it would be easier to come and park, along the street and walk to your closest access. When in reality, that can be very trying and an unpleasant experience looking for parking, whereas there's plenty of parking on the other side. It's a smooth ride over. And there you go. I think too, and again, quite frankly, what I've heard from several customers, potential customers, is that if they were out of traffic, they would be more inclined to do so. But what is the true benefit if they are also sitting in traffic with those cars? So those are some obstacles to overcome, but we continue to promote the service, educate where we can, and hope to see more riders. Yes, ma'am.
I'd just like to say that I fully support Beach Reach for a number of reasons. One is that traffic and parking is going to continue to be an issue on the island. And as traffic becomes more congested and parking becomes harder and harder, the Beach Reach is going to be even more important. So keep up the good work.
Thank you, ma'am.
Just make a clarification, make sure I understood what you said. If we had an emergency lane on the connector, and if your bus ran in the emergency lane outside of traffic, you think that we would have more people riding the bus?
100%.
Thank you.
Nice lead. Daniel, what else? Anything? Other questions?
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you coming, taking the time.
Yes, sir.
Always good to see you.
John.
So let's do, I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules of order and cover agenda item 6C4. Make that in the form of a motion.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So we are going to move to under C, Public Services, discussion of bicycles and golf carts on public roads. There's some information in your packet on this topic. Blair had asked to. Yeah. There.
Yeah, I asked this be put on the agenda because I think it's important for all of us to have this information to answer to residents when you're questioned. I know I'm questioned all the time about golf carts with impaired drivers, golf carts with grandmothers sitting on the back holding a baby and no seatbelts, bicycles running down the middle of Palm Boulevard. And I think it's would be helpful for all of us to understand two things. One is whether or not they're violating any laws of South in Isle of Palms that they could be prosecuted for. And secondly, if there was an accident with one of our residents running into one of these people, what is the liability to that resident? So are we setting up additional liability to the residents because currently we've got golf carts and bicycles running down major thoroughfares? So those are the two big things from my perspective, and questions that I've been asked by citizens and the reasons why I got this put on the agenda.
Thank you. And again, you've got.
Well, I just think it's very timely. Considering, was it in Texas? They had that tragedy over the weekend, or
I didn't see it.
the family of two families, 6 total individuals in a golf cart, and they got hit. 4 of the family members died and 2 are in critical condition still. And they got hit by an impaired driver. But this is fear I've always had, and it just happened. So
again, you got some information in your packet, Chief or Desiree, who's going to lead us here.
Yeah, I asked the chief to prepare a very short presentation for you all to answer some of these questions. And we also have our city prosecutor here that may be able to answer any specific questions you may have about state statute and maybe what ordinances the city should consider in the future to tighten up maybe some of the issues that we're seeing and certainly address the public safety concern with the use of both of those modes. So Chief, please. Thank you.
Good evening. So I do have a couple of slides that we put together. I believe they should be in your packet. These are basically outlining state statutes to let you know where we stand now. And they might show up behind me here in just a second. I love getting shocked. So you'll see the first one. I'm going to kind of start moving as she's getting to it. The bicycle statute, state statute gives explicit authority for bicycles to travel in the roadway. And it gives them all the rights as a driver. It also gives them all the duties of a driver. That means they have to stop at stop signs. They have to stop at a red light. Now, the caveat for a red light for a motorcycle and a bicycle would be if they get there, and there's no traffic coming, they just have to sit there for a few moments to make sure it's not coming, and then they can proceed through that red light, which would seldom happen on our busy traveled roads. But it is something I wanted to point out. So it does include all the traffic control that they have to follow, just like any other vehicle traveling upon the roadway. And it is something that some of our officers do approach. It. We've had 6 stops on bicycles this year. I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but I will tell you from the agencies I worked for in the past, those numbers would be 0. So it is not something that is widely enforced, but something that is a danger and something that we have educated our department on looking into. The other part would be golf carts. I'll get more into what we're doing in the future here in just a moment, but the other part you'll see on here will be golf carts. And state statute authorizes golf carts to travel on secondary roadways. Palm Boulevard from Breach Inlet to 41st, actually, yes, 41st would be Highway 517. That highway indication is what allows LSVs to drive on there, but not golf carts. From 41st down to 57th, that is not a highway indicated by a DOT, so they can travel on that part of Palm Boulevard. But every other road, minus the connector on Isle of Palms, golf carts can travel upon that roadway, as long as the speed limit is less than 35, which, as we all know, is everywhere on Isle of Palms with the exception of the connector. Golf carts may operate during the day. Municipalities on barrier islands do have the ability to add an ordinance that authorizes golf carts to drive at night. That's not necessarily something I would highly recommend at this point. Their lights are not very bright when they're doing that. But it is something that is out there that you can do. Golf carts may not operate on a sidewalk. They are a vehicle. That's why they have to travel on the roadway. I think I have a statute further on that, but maybe not. I will say the other part we'll get to in just a minute. Low speed vehicles also outlined a state statute, the same chapter as golf carts, but it's got its own paragraph. They can operate on any road in Isle of Palms as long as speed limit is less than 35 miles an hour. So again, the only thing they can't travel on is the Isle of Palms connector. They have to be registered. They have to have a license plate. Golf carts have to be registered. And another rule that a lot of people forget are that golf carts can only operate within 4 miles of the address that they are registered for. The exception to that would be anybody that lives in Wild Dunes. They can operate within 4 miles of the gate to the entrance of the HOA community because it's a private community. Golf carts and low-speed vehicles must be insured. They must have registration. They can register them with DMV. If they don't, it is a violation. The other part for rules when it comes to golf cart that city has available to them is that they're under 56-100. Municipalities have the ability to prohibit the operation of low-speed vehicles on any street or highway that's under their jurisdiction if that prohibition is necessary in the interest of safety. You're typically going to need statistical information that will state that it is a safety issue. Our vehicle collisions involving golf carts and LSVs are very, very low. That same statute also gives municipalities the ability to create a golf cart path on the shoulder of the roadway with approval from SCDOT, which we've kind of done in that corner around 21st Avenue. That would be an example of what that looks like. But again, has to have DOT's approval. It also in another statute, 56.7 or 56.5.710 provides similar abilities for municipalities related to bicycles. There is something that is a wide conversation, and I've been told my entire career as a police officer and most of our officers, when I started polling, were told the same thing, that bicycles are not allowed to ride on the sidewalk. And that is not an accurate statement. State law does not prohibit them from riding on a bicycle or on a sidewalk. Some municipalities have city ordinances that prohibit riding on a sidewalk, but it does give them explicit direction or opportunity to ride in the roadway and lays out what they need to do for that around there. pertaining to our approaches, we've worked with dispatch to get an actual, because in the past, we weren't able to give good numbers on golf cart stops specifically, or bicycle stops. Charleston County Dispatch has worked with us to create a coding in their system so that they can document when it's a bicycle or when it's a golf cart. That's what's giving us the ability now to start to pull these stats when we weren't able to in the future or in the past. Another thing that we've done is we've started to incorporate bicycle and golf cart and LSV enforcement in with our traffic enforcement program that we started. It was one of our goals in the police department this year, was to reduce vehicle collisions. And part of that was through enforcement, including on bicycles, golf carts, and LSVs. Code enforcement's also currently working. We just brought on our 2 code enforcement, our full-time and our part-time. They're working to develop something where we can get in with our short-term rental companies. Because a lot of times what we see on golf carts is that we stop it and it's somebody from another state that has no clues what the rules are, or they have no clue at all what the rules or state laws are. And they just kind of got there and there's a golf cart that's rented with their house. And so they jump in it and start riding around. So what we're working on is a way that we can communicate those laws with them when they rent that place if there's a golf cart there. We're also working with our code enforcement to reach out to some of these golf cart rental companies that will drive them over and drop them off. Because if you have a registered golf cart in Mount Pleasant that you're driving over to drop off here, you're in violation of the state law. You're not operating within 4 miles of the registered address. So we're working with them to address that because they're setting people up for tickets already. Another thing that we're doing is specifically with our National Night Out program this year, we're rolling out a new thing called Project 365. And our goal with Project 365 is geared towards golf carts and golf cart safety. That is something that we just started working on and planning out. And one of our officers during their field training officer program, their presentation at the end dealt with DUIs and golf cart enforcement and those types of things. So we're kind of all working on these things and building that program now on how we can do that. But that is something we're working on. Some other information just to let you know, 35 tickets. We went back and looked at the last 10 years for the police department related to golf cart violation. And in those 10 years, 35 tickets were issued for golf cart violations. 50% of those were in 2020 and 2021. So we've ramped up our enforcement over those 10 years and significantly since 2020 and 2021, when we got here, we started to work on those. We actually, in 2019, which I base up because that's when I got here and I had control over it. In 2019, from when I got here to now, we've written more tickets in those 4 years for golf cart violations than the entire total for the 6 years before that. So we are moving forward. It may not feel like it, but I can tell you our officers are working on this. They're out there making more charges and this is growing. And this isn't something specific to our island. Golf carts, I can tell you, I live in Somerville and we have conversations on our neighborhood page about golf carts. Same type of issues that we see here and working with Dorchester County Sheriff's Office to get them to enforce it over there as well. So this isn't unique to just us. This is a broader conversation in the state that I think is gaining more traction statewide that might lead to something in the future.
Chief, the citations you're issuing, right, like 20 and 2020 and 21. What are most of them? I mean, what type of citations are you issuing? Is it?
Majority of them would fall under improper operation because the statute for golf cart kind of lists out, you cannot do all these things and it's all under one
No
ordinance.
sidewalk.
Correct.
Okay.
And then the other one would be driving at night. We get a lot of them. And another thing too, to point out with these, when we stop a golf cart, we may not write for that golf cart violation. Maybe we stopped them for something and found that they were driving under the influence. We're not going to charge with the operating violation for the golf cart because we're making the driving under the influence charge, and that's a greater charge. We may charge them with disregarding a stop sign and not charge them with the golf cart violation because we can, it's injury to insult or insult to injury when we're here's your $400 ticket or your $200 ticket and 4 points for running the stop sign. And by the way, here's another one for this. A lot of times it's you ran the stop sign. Here's the education portion of don't drive the golf cart in this manner, those types of things. And sometimes when we talk about underage driving, because I know that's a topic here. And when we specifically talk about underage driving, remember, they don't have driver's license for us to write tickets to. That's not something we're going to try here in the municipal court. So we send it to family court. And do we really, you know, we have to balance in our mind, do we really want to put a juvenile into the justice system over a golf cart violation? Or do we want to take the time where we can educate the juvenile, get them back home where they belong, educate the parents at the same time, which is what we normally do. We stop them. We don't write any tickets. We say, how old are you? Do you have a driver's license? No, I'm 8 years old. I don't have a driver's license. We're not writing an 8-year-old a ticket. So we're going to take that 8-year-old to their home or have their parents come to us and pick their kids up. And we get our enforcement through that way, more of an education approach. Again, not trying to put every juvenile through our system just because they're violating something. They probably don't even realize they're violating something until we tell them.
Couple follow-ups. Is there a minimum speed for either bicycles or golf carts?
No, sir.
If no seat belts are used on an LSV, is that a violation? That's something,
No, sir.
all right, I'm striking out. Is there anything that we can do as a council to encourage bicycles and golf carts to use interior streets on the island and not use the main thoroughfares?
I think an education program there is definitely a way we can get that out there. And golf carts should not be on Palm Boulevard anyways. LSV still can be, but I do think we could certainly do an education type program where it's encouraging people to use those secondary roads due to the amount of traffic that's on that main road. Realizing it's not necessarily we're looking at an enforcement arm, but more of a public campaign of let's educate and let's be safe and those types of things that we can do that. And we can actually incorporate that into that same messaging that we're sending to our short-term rentals about the rules pertaining to golf carts and bicycles. And, you know, bicycles are, I get it. I get behind them too. And it can be very frustrating. I totally understand. And it feels unsafe because when you go to pass them, you know, and they're supposed to, nothing says they have to use that total right-hand side. They should, but they don't have to. They can ride in the middle of that lane if they want to. The only exception is if there's a bike lane available, they have to use the bike lane. And
Can
not
I get a ticket when I pass them?
No, sir, we wouldn't write you a ticket. for that. But it is, I think that's our biggest thing is a public campaign. If I'm understanding correctly, I think that's the best approach for that. And it's something we can certainly run with.
Is there anything that we as a council can do to help you in that regard?
You know, I'm not sure. You kind of caught me off guard on that one. I could come up with something off the top of my head, maybe a proclamation. You know, we do a lot of proclamation about boater safety, and we can really get a proclamation out that pushes that out and just kind of starts that education. And, you know, maybe we set a month apart every year that we say this month, like you got boater safety month, you've got voter safety month, I guess, but we could come up with our own thing for golf cart safety on Isle of Palms and really push that messaging out and get banners made, flyers made. But a proclamation says that it's not just me as a police chief and our police officers telling people we wanted. It says, hey, as a community, this is what we're looking for to protect your loved ones when they're riding on golf carts and bicycles.
Longer term, a better solution would be to have Palm Boulevard safe for golf carts and bicycles by having lanes.
Yeah, bicycle lanes, golf cart lanes, all the things that perhaps DOT doesn't want us to do.
Jimmy?
If I think you remember, I think it was in the last year, you and I had a conversation about this, and you were kind of to do some research, and came back, presented to council. And one thing I took away from it is that there's a lot of state statutes involved here. So our hands are kind of tied. If you remember, Chief, my concern was small children and babies are sitting in these golf carts, and I was worried, could we put in some sort of child safety seat restraints or something? And if I remember correctly, you came back and said pretty much no. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir. We looked at it, and I would tell you that I see it. We had one on the 4th of July. When a golf cart started to go off, we had somebody fall off. And so we would love to be able to say, yes, they have to restrain them. But unfortunately, state statute gives us the ability with golf carts to either create a golf cart path, prohibit where they're at because of safety reasons, or the only other thing we as a barrier island can do that's unique to the rest of the state is to create that thing that allows them to drive at night. Nowhere does it give us the ability to add a requirement for seat belts or child restraint devices. We would like to assume that's common, that would be something that people would just know to do, but you wouldn't need me if you had that.
I've got a couple of suggestions. One of them is pretty easy for us to do, and that is to put signs along Palm Boulevard in the areas where golf carts are prohibited on the road, saying golf carts are prohibited, so that all of our visitors know that golf carts cannot be on the road. That would have to be, I think, followed up with what you're talking about in terms of informing the public where they are permitted. And I know it's too much, I think, to put on one sign, but that's the first thing to do. And the second one, I think, is South Carolina DOT is all into what's called complete streets now, which is adding golf cart lanes, separate sidewalks to roadways and whatnot. So there are things that we can do with SCDOT. And I think, Desiree, you said that there's been some discussion with the DOT about possibly adding a golf cart lane to Palm.
Not necessarily. What has happened for many years, the city has discussed what would be possible with the amount of right of way that Palm Boulevard has, which is 100-foot right of way on both sides. Several years ago, the city developed a conceptual design of what that could look like if we were to utilize the complete space along the public right of way. I think that as part of our efforts and working with SCDOT, not only with the connector study, the corridor study, but some of the other initiatives that we've been able to get kicked off, particularly with drainage, I think there's an opportunity here to leverage some of those relationships to enhance whatever we're doing currently with their consultants to explore conceptually what we could do to accommodate bike and ped golf carts along Palm Boulevard to facilitate their, traveling
think-
on the island.
It's a good opportunity. I think we can continue those conversations and hopefully something will come of it, because it's less expensive than building a road. And it could be on Palm in particular with all of the right of way there. There could be one on the land side right next to the sidewalk. That would be perfect because it would really get the golf carts off of the road very easily. And just to let you know, that dirt path, which is the unofficial golf cart path that the residents use along Palm in front of the
It's the Jimmy Ward Speedway.
would not be considered a cart path by DOT, but it certainly is convenient, thank goodness for us locals, because we do know not to drive on Palm. I also heard discussion, I'm not sure where, that there is a coordinated effort now among the islands to sort of evaluate golf cart use and how it can be better control.
Not that I'm aware of, and I actually reached out to Andy, Andy Benke at Sullivan's Island just to see what they were doing, and they've been talking about it. I think they have the same concerns that we do, but to date, there's not been a more of an organized effort to either change any of their regulations or do anything different. They pretty much handle some of the same issues that we have with golf carts in the same way that Chief has described.
One last thing, and I'll be finished. Chief, please, I hope we never allow golf cart use at night. It's dangerous enough if a golf cart is I don't care who's driving it, if they're in a wreck with a car, the golf cart loses, and you're lucky if you come out without being injured heavily or worse. And then the second thing is that please, whenever you see children driving those golf carts, do something about it. It just scares me to death, those two things.
Yes, ma'am. So first, you guys would have to make the ordinance to allow at night, and I would not recommend that at this point for safety reasons. But if you choose to, that's just my recommendation. The second part is we have had multiple discussions over the last month about golf cart safety and enforcement within our team and what that looks like and how we can do better. There's always room for us to be better at what we do with everything. And we understand that. And that's part of our mission, is to be better.
Okay, but let's see if we can get those signs up. That might be something at least positive that we can do.
So Chief, have you started the education campaign with the bike rental companies and the golf cart companies yet or not? That's to be done.
It's to be done.
Kind
It's
of back to Blair's question, what can happen? I mean, education certainly, they're the starting point for sure. Rental companies and short-term rentals or the bicycle golf cart spots. Blair, are you getting what you want out of this tonight from
I am. I'm looking forward to Attorney Skipper talking to us on the flip side of that, what liability motor vehicle operators have when they bump into some of these people.
Chief, when you enforce the driving at night, are we talking sunset? Or are we talking truly at night, dark? Or is
Technically,
it up to the officer?
I
to
mean,
make the
normally it's
call?
gonna be the officer's discretion, but
Uh-huh.
when you look at the law pertaining to nighttime, it's got a certain period of time after dusk or just before dusk that it defines in state statute. I don't know that right off the top of my head. So most of us officers are gonna look at it and be like, it's dark outside. You should know to have headlights on.
Mhm.
So we're gonna stop you at this point. And most of them they're going home, or they look at us and go, I can't drive now, it's got headlights. And then the others look at us and go, jib, jib, jib. And then they go to jail for DUI.
Yeah. I'll be careful then.
Any other questions? Thank you all for the great feedback. I think we've got some ways too, as I sat up here and thought to move forward with our campaign and use some of our resources like our new business community that's coming together, and maybe some of the businesses over in Mount Pleasant is too, as well.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Chief.
If
Thank you,
you-
Chief.
At any time, Chief, please let us know what we can do to help you in this regard. This is a big issue for law. Thank you.
Skipper, you want to opine a bit?
I didn't prepare any remarks, but I'm happy to try and answer any questions.
You got no slides for us?
I have no slides. I apologize. But I'm happy to try and answer any questions as far as what I see.
Mr. Skipper, if you would, just to educate all of us. I expect every one of us has been behind a golf cart, probably everybody in this room, and you've got somebody holding a baby in their lap. And you've got somebody else driving and everybody's having a good time because they're at the beach and they're doing things that aren't necessarily safe. And it always scares me whether I'm passing them or approaching them because they're coming the opposite way of traffic. If I hit them, what type of liability is that set up for me or for other residents on the island?
I think that your liability issues there are the same as if you have an accident with a vehicle, as long as they're operating within the law. If you're following behind them and you run into the back of them, then pretty much every lawyer is going to tell you that you're at fault if you hit somebody from behind. So I don't think that's going to change or be impacted. With respect to the bicycle issue, you have a requirement to give them space. There is a statute that deals with due care. We don't see it written very often, that you as a driver of a vehicle have a duty to drive with due care for the safety of others. The bicycle stuff's actually a little bit interesting because there's some specific statutes related to harassment of bicyclists, and intentionally interfering with them. You can be ticketed for that. So there is, but from a liability question, if they're operating where they're legally allowed to operate and you cause the accident, it's no different than if they were in a car. I mean, your liability is still going to be the same. The issue, like with Councilmember Anderson's point, is the likelihood of an increase of injury is going to be more substantial with a bicycle or a golf cart. I mean, it's just common sense. You don't have any airbags, and so that's going to increase the injuries, which is obviously going to increase liability as far as exposure and cost for the person who's operating the car that hits the bicyclist or hits the golf cart operator.
So if we had dedicated bicycle lanes, if we had dedicated bicycle lanes and golf cart paths, that changes that equation to a certain extent then, because by law, they must use those existing paths.
Correct. And if I remember correctly with the bicycles, it's not, if there's a bicycle lane, they have to operate in the bicycle lane. If there's a bicycle path, they can still operate on the road. Right? Am I correct on that? I mean, I believe that that's the circumstance there. So that's the difference when we start talking about a bike lane, like the connector, right? And a path. So in a path, they could choose, hey, I still want to ride on the right-hand side of the shoulder. And that's what the statute requires, but it gives them control over that. It says, hey, ride to the right, But if they have any type of obstacle or there's sand on the road or whatever, it's not safe, it's bumpy on the side, they can pull over and ride right down the middle of the lane. And then the duty switches to the motor vehicle operator to safely with due care, go around that person. And I think that's probably what some of the issue that I assume that you are looking at and addressing is really going on Palm and it backing up traffic. And I don't think we have that issue, or we shouldn't have that issue with golf carts other than the education aspect of that. But that's more likely not a golf cart that's slowing down traffic on Palm. That's bicyclists that's slowing down traffic on Palm.
Well, there's plenty of golf carts that are slowing down traffic on
Sure.
Palm as well.
Well, and like I said, that's the educational, they are actually violating the law, right? By operating the golf cart where it shouldn't be operating. The bicyclist is not violating the law. That's the difference.
As I read South Carolina statute 56-2-100, and that gives municipalities the ability to prohibit operation of low-speed vehicles on any street or highway under their jurisdiction if that prohibition is necessary in the interest of safety. And it says that also under 56-5-710 provides similar abilities for bicycles. Do you know of any municipalities that have actually exercised that and said, you know what? You can't really have a bicycle on a street like this because it's unsafe?
Well, I know, and I think the chief spoke to it a little bit. I've seen some municipalities and local municipalities that have restricted bicycles on sidewalks and have created a municipal ordinance that specifically says you can't operate your bicycle on a sidewalk. That's probably a little different situation. But I'm not aware of anything where they've gone beyond and made some special outline because of a safety documented number of accidents. And I think that's probably what that would take. I mean, specifically, if you look at 56-105 F1, a political, that was talking about limiting, it's section 4. A political subdivision may not reduce or otherwise amend or the other restrictions placed on the operation of a permitted golf cart contained in this section. And when it's talking about otherwise, it's referencing what the chief was mentioning with respect to the nighttime operation and extending it. Basically, the statute says, hey, we've decided what the rules are going to be with respect to golf cart operation, and you can't do anything other than that besides increase it. There is a provision in there that you can change that 4-mile limitation to 2 miles and limit that and kind of shrink that down. But that's it. Otherwise, it's, hey, here's what the statute says, and y'all can't do anything to amend it. It would be, I guess, similar to changing a general traffic law, right? You know, we can't, the state says it's illegal to run a stop sign. We can't say, oh, no, it's not. You can do a roll and stop. I mean, so it's kind of the same argument. They're saying, hey, here's what the rules are, and we're going to let you, if you want to play with any areas, here's what you can play with. But other than that, it's off limits.
Other questions? Mr. Skipper, thank you, sir.
Thank you all.
Blair, thank you for bringing this up. I mean, this will be a long game for sure.
It is,
From an
Mayor,
education
and I would suggest that we put on our agenda moving forward for the safety of both the visitors and the residents and the liability issues that we've talked about, that we start the process of adding bike and golf cart paths on Palm Boulevard.
Fair enough.
Thank you, sir.
Yep. We'll revert back to our agenda item 4 with our city administrator and department heads, the dashboard and departmental reports.
All right, you all have a copy of the July 2022 dashboard. We've made some changes based on the great feedback that we received last month. Hopefully you all can recognize those. We currently have 4 vacancies, 3 in the police department, 1 part-time grounds at the rec center. Applications are open. Anybody who's interested, please apply. You can see there the upcoming community events, the annual half rubber tournament coming up this Saturday. Farmers market every third Thursday of the month. The next one will be August 18th at the rec. Coffee with the mayor, August 26th. I believe the location of that has not yet been confirmed, but will be soon, and that will be shared through social media and the website. And then in September, we have the very popular Community Wellness Fair. We're going to expand on some of these schedules as you hear a little bit more detail from the department heads, but first couple schedules, you can see city revenues by category and city expenses. Very little activity in both revenues and expenditures. Those numbers show year to date for FY23. So we've only done 1 month out of the budget for the fiscal year. So that's reflected there. With police department, fire department calls, we're seeing less calls for service than we had last year. Here you can see a little bit of what Chief Cornett was talking about, their focus with enforcement, with traffic and speeding. Those numbers are up from compared to last year. Pretty much in line with the docket at the municipal court and the number of cases. You can see that for June and July, we're pretty much the same as last year. Not a lot of change. For the public works, garbage and yard debris collections is slightly down. Maybe Donnie can expand on that a little bit more. Certainly seeing increased activity in the summer, but just slightly less than last year. One thing I did want to point out in the building department section at the bottom, you can see the total number of short-term rental licenses issued so far. That number is at 1,536, so roughly 3% increase from last month, where we had 1,496. And I know we'll talk a little bit more about short-term rentals in a minute. If there are no questions, we'll go ahead and I guess we're ready for departmental report.
Yeah, got one, Mr. Mayor, if I can.
Sure.
Chief Cornett, on the parking citations, when you look at 2022 current year to date, it's what, roughly about a third of the parking citations that we had last year. So that's roughly about a third. So what would you attribute that to? More better enforced parking in the angled parking area of Palm, or why would we have that kind of decrease? I guess I'm asking.
So a couple things, and I'll be brutally honest with them. First, the use of text to park in Front Beach has been very successful as far as a lot of those metered violations that we used to write. We've seen significant decrease in violators there. And we did have some weekends when we were transitioning from the Flowbird app and things weren't working the way they were supposed to, and kiosks weren't working the way they were supposed to, that we didn't feel comfortable writing tickets in those lots because we didn't know who had paid, who hadn't, who had tried, and we weren't able to see it. So we gave a few free weekends there, and that will cover most of your Front Beach area. I think we could probably say a good bit from there. Now I'll tell you, quite honestly, with the rest of it, some of it's got to do with the parking improvements and the use of the angle parking. We have more people abiding, but some of it has to do with the management, and that would fall on me, making sure that our personnel were out there writing tickets, and that's something we can certainly improve on. And that is part of the decrease there, and that's something we've already had those conversations over the last couple of weeks. I took a hard dive into this after I saw the same thing you just saw, and Councilman Hahn pointed it out last time, and I was even out here this weekend looking at it and making corrections to personnel over the weekend, and it falls directly on me, making sure that they were doing their thing. I'm awake. I've got it. We're going to move forward and be better with that part.
I have noticed an increase in catching people that are violating this in the last week. So thank you for that. There's also, and obviously Palm Boulevard's being my bonnet today. There are 2 box trucks and a dump truck that apparently are parking permanently on Palm Boulevard. They've been there for months. And I'd ask somebody to do something about that. I mean, as limited as parking is and as precious as parking is, we don't need box trucks and dump trucks parking on Palm Boulevard.
I will get somebody to take a look at that, sir.
Thank you.
Chief, you're
Did
up.
I answer your question? Sure.
Thank you.
I don't know.
You go
I'm-
first.
I'm up. So this is new to me. I missed last month because of COVID. So I'm going to try not to talk more than I need to. Most of ours I'll just kind of hit on the front page. I do want to point out FTO Santulli was recognized as employee of the second quarter. That's something we've been doing and it's going really well. I'm glad to recognize him. And then incidents of interest for July include 45 arrests, 396 traffic stops, 9 drug charges, 2 gun violations, which brings us up to 10 for the year. And that's, I do want to point that out. That is significant for our size force and even being with the vacancies that we've had, the number of drugs and gun violations that our officers are getting shows a productivity that they're out there working on those things. So
When you
that's,
say gun violation, what do you mean with that?
those are going to be people that are unlawfully possessing firearms. They're carrying them and, or most of these, I'm trying to think through to make sure I don't give any inaccurate information. All of these are going to be unlawful carries. People who either were unlawful carrying, or they were in possession of a stolen firearm, or they were a felon in possession of a firearm that we've most likely uncovered during a stop for another violation with those. But those are 10 guns that are not on the street to cause any harm to anybody else. And it doesn't sound like a lot, but for a small department our size, that's a pretty significant number. And then 140 traffic violations and 8 arrests for driving under the influence. That number is concerning because it is still going up. And that's something that started during COVID. We've seen a steady increase in DUIs, and not just us. I think that's statewide. So the other thing with staffing and vacancies real quick, and I think I'll step out of the way and let you ask any questions. We do have one of our officers that we've hired is at the academy now. He started on the 31st of July. He will do 2 months there and then he'll come back and then he'll do his field training. We've given 1 conditional offer for a police officer position. He will be leaving Texas, where he is currently stationed with the Army, and then coming back here towards the end of the month. He's currently set to start September 20th. But then he's going to have to go to the academy and everything too. So that's just positive stuff. So what questions might you have on any of this?
Would it help if we gave you authority to increase the pay for beach services people to fill those vacancies?
I think when we get to next year, before we fill those again, there's going to be some conversations at city administrator. We always talk every year as we evaluate. When we sit down and do our budget, Debbie and Desiree and I sit down and we look at, do we need to pay more? I would imagine we might face that next year. And some of it too is going to be in our hiring practice of how we're hiring and setting a culture from the moment they start. And that's something we've all talked about this week and improving for next year. So it'll be a conversation that the city administrator and I have for sure.
Thank you.
Chief, I thought we had budgeted the extra livability,
Code enforcement.
code enforcement. I'm not seeing that on here. Am I as an opening? So did you fill that?
Yes, sir.
They're
We,
filled.
we actually filled, interestingly enough, you met the code enforcement
Right.
officer last month. And then the part-time code enforcement was one of our beach service officers that was very interested in it and took that position. And I have to say that he is doing fantastic. Both of them are doing great things there
Great.
so far.
One question somebody asked me the other day, I'm not sure. How many tickets have you written for smoking on the beach?
I'm not sure off the top of my head. I would imagine it's very small. Remember when we
Yeah.
passed it, that the
Yeah.
conversation was that it would be more of a education approach.
Right.
I know I've gone out there several times and just walk up to somebody and say, hey, you probably don't know this, but you can't smoke out here. And they'd look at me funny and I'm like, well, you got to put it out.
Right.
So I don't think we've written many. I know there was one positive. There was one over the weekend that was just issued because I was looking at the incident report yesterday.
Thank you.
But I don't know the total number off the top of my head.
But Chief, that would show up in the next month's report, right?
That's correct. That's correct.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. Did I keep it short enough?
Sure.
All right. Good evening. Good to see y'all again.
We had, for the fire department, 130 calls for service in July. That's, typically we have about 1,000 calls annually. So we're looking at, around 13% or 14% of our call volume in the month of July. So very busy month for us. June and July are our heavy hitters, and that's no surprise to anybody for sure. We don't have any vacancies at this point. We have been training our new employee, firefighter Comer, getting him up to speed, and he's done wonderful. So right now it's great to have no vacancies in our department. So we're super lucky, especially in this climate that we are with trying to hire quality individuals. So we also have, as you can see, a drop in our call volume this year compared to last year. And then on the back page, what you'll see in response to that, which has been phenomenal, we have filled that a little bit of extra time with the training that has taken place. And a lot of this training on the back page there is detailed, the people who completed those trainings. And a lot of those are multi-hour trainings with multiple jurisdictions involved in preparation for potentially going automatic aid in the future. But if that is not the case, we still are mutual aid, and we have to work with our partners, Sullivan's Island, Mount Pleasant, City of Charleston, and build those relationships. So we were really working hard over the last 30 to 45 days. So where our call volume has decreased, that's been a blessing to us. We've been able to take on more training opportunities, which has been phenomenal. I had the distinct pleasure back in earlier in July on the 21st to go to the Mount Pleasant Chamber of Commerce, and Battalion Chief Giddens and Rourke, Engineers Bosman, Marlowe, and Mello, Firefighter Bullock, Hogan, and Sisk were all recognized by the Chamber for their actions on March 31st with a water rescue. And that was Chief Briscoe, one of his last days with us. And we were at that ceremony, and we had to leave for that water rescue call. And that was a phenomenal opportunity to recognize those individuals. So we're trying to do more of that to recognize our personnel. So that was great. The other event I want to highlight or two events on the 22nd was Sea Shift. They're on today. That's Battalion Chief Smith. They had a fire on Sullivan's Island. We were the first arriving unit, Chief Smith was, and there were a few boats and a kayak and a paddleboard that were involved in fire. And the resident was actively trying to extinguish the fire. And we got there and were able to assist. And we were the first arriving fire suppression unit. Sullivan's Island was a little bit further down on that island, on that end of the island now with their construction of their new station. So we were able to get in there first and make an aggressive attack underneath the house. And luckily the resident had really darkened down the fire, and we were just able to remove that resident from the hazard and extinguish the rest of the fire. Later that night on Palm Boulevard, around 11:30 there on the 22nd, we had a potential lightning strike that came in through the HVAC, and it traveled up to where there were 5 branch lines where propane was supplying various appliances in the home. And those lines were compromised when our firefighters arrived. It was a large vacation rental there on Palm near 28. They had double porches or a large porch on the side, and they had about 17, 18 people of various ages out there waiting on the fire department. They did not want to go outside outside of that cover because it was still actively storming and lightning, and it was really raining hard. So the police department assisted us with getting those guests off the porch. They helped us blocking traffic, and our firefighters got in there, located the fire, and extinguished it very quickly. The rental company was phenomenal. They were able to get those individuals housing that they could go to that night. So we had early notification. They had working smoke detectors, which was fantastic. So we're going to reach out to that rental company and tell them thank you. We have not done that yet. But part of our initiative with Fire Marshal Stafford is to be aggressive with those rental companies and
But with education, as Chief Cornett mentioned, that's, being proactive, and that is huge to educate and reduce that opportunity in the future where we have those challenges, because we don't want to get there and have to extinguish the fire. We want to put ourselves out of the fire business if possible. And that's through proactive education and code enforcement. And a great example there of how we're going to leverage that education that Chief Cornett spoke about when they are out there on the beach and on the streets.
Jimmy, it's gonna be real quick, I promise. Not looking for an answer tonight, but just something I'd like for you to think about.
Yes, sir.
Something that I would like to look at again that we did a few years ago, looking into converting our service from sending ladder trucks and big fire trucks to EMS calls and setting up our own EMS unit, not Charleston County, but Isle of Palms. On Isle of Palms, what would that take? Are you in favor of it? I believe the vast majority of our calls are EMS related rather than fires, right?
That's correct. EMS and water rescue are a large chunk of our call volume.
I'd just be very interested in hearing your thoughts on that, and if it's something that's worth us talking about further. That's all. Maybe next month.
It's on the project list tonight.
Good.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. I think that's great. I would love to present some information to give you, what research says and what our challenges are, and look at our call volume and present data.
Okay,
I'd be
great.
more than happy to do that. That's great. Thank you.
To add on to what Councilman Ward said, would it be possible at some point in the future for you to also segregate those calls between residents, people that are renting on the island, and people that are day visitors on the island, so that we can see, what load we're carrying for the different categories of people?
We do not have the ability to do that now with Firehouse, which is our current record management system. But when Image Trend comes online in the next couple of months, we'll have potentially a little more capability. We're still getting through that system. Right now, we track residents and non-residents by a block in Firehouse. When they do the report, they look at the address, and whoever's compiling the report will say, okay, they're a resident, they're a non-resident. As far as diving deeper, that may be a little more difficult. I just don't know if we have the capability. But to your point, last meeting, we're definitely looking at that and talking to Brittany, our contact at Charleston County, who's our RMS administrator, on how we can do that. She did some training for us this past week. We talked about that, and also jellyfish stings, because, for example, last week we had around 34 or 35 jellyfish stings within an hour. And so for us, that's almost like a mass casualty type experience. It overwhelms resources. They're, obviously mainly benign type things, but that customer needs some assistance, from us. So we talked about how do we document that without having to create, 35 reports, but also be able to pull the data so we can present it and track it to show our call volume. So we definitely have that on the list, and we're looking for it. I know that'll be a valuable piece of information for you and us and everybody else in the city.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chief.
All right.
You'll be
Thank
back
you.
up in a moment. Yeah.
I'll be brief. First thing, staff, including Desiree and I, met with Charleston County Environmental Services. I know you're probably aware of some of the issues we've had with Charleston County Recycling. They're in a transition. They spoke about the decrease in the number of calls that they've had, but part of that may be due to City Hall and Amy and Public Works fielding most of those calls, and we're trying to work through those issues. And I think Charleston County is still working through some of those issues, but hopefully the efficiency for our residents will improve. Other things, we're still transitioning. September 1st will be the transition of the elimination of the backyard service for the Pelican Bay subdivision. And then shortly thereafter, I've been approached by the next subdivision. And I've ordered 190 gallon carts, so we will transition after that to that one, as well as Mariners Walk. About 12 years ago, I pulled the 90 gallon carts and backyard service from one half, the southern half of Mariners Walk, and we will transition to the northern side of Mariners Walk, which will give us another 40 cans to redistribute across the way. Other than that, that's all I have. I'm not sure if Robert has anything. Any questions?
Any update on the mural or the painting of the maintenance building and the fences?
No, we did receive a list of potential artists that do this around Charleston. I reached out to the CVB just for their insight, but not yet.
Thank you.
I just want to expand on some of what Donnie was saying about our meeting with Charleston County Environmental about their recycling collection. As y'all know, they transitioned and completely outsourced that operation in June 6th. A lot of the issues that they're having is just the familiarity of these new drivers with their routes. A lot of them are new. They did hire some of the drivers that Charleston County had that are familiar with our route, but a lot of them are new. I did ask them to report and ask Republic, who is the company, that any missed days or missed streets the day of service must be picked up within 24 hours. As you all know, we have a very specific ordinance in the books that only allow placement of these garbage cans by the curb by 5 p.m. the day before and not until 9 a.m. the day after. So we want to make sure that that happens within that time period, because we're getting a lot of calls from neighbors upset about their neighbors having their garbage out. It doesn't look good. We understand. We don't like it either, but I guess we're trying to figure out a more consistent schedule now with this transition. So, and also encouraging residents to call Charleston County, their main line, because as soon as they receive a complaint or a missed service, they immediately turn that out to Republic. Most folks don't know we do not manage the recycling collection. Charleston County does, and now it's done by Republic. So we'll continue to push that information out, but hopefully folks that are listening can help us spread the word.
And Donnie, thank you for continuing to push the backdoor service elimination. That's a huge efficiency gain. So thank you for doing that.
In the batter's box.
You're up.
So we kind of have a law, if that's a statement that you can use in recreation, but we did in our summer shine camp. It went great. We had 8 weeks of lots of fun and messy days and water days. And thanks to the PD, the Public Works and Fire Department, they all came out on Hero Week and talked with the children, let them climb on the trucks, and did a great job. And we really appreciate that. Our youth and adult sports right now is registration time. Practices and games will start in September. September will be a very busy month for us because of a lot of our programming starts back, particularly with the children. A lot of that drops off during the summer months. Our beach run, we had between 375 and 400 participants. Went very well this year. Our volleyball camp, our soccer camp, our basketball camps all went well. This week we have our last volleyball camp going on, and it'll end on Thursday. Our city administrator gave part of my report a while ago. Some of our upcoming events, our half rubber tournament is this weekend. And I think right now we have 7 teams signed up for that. Our Connect to Run and Walk is October the 1st. That's in conjunction with Exchange Club here on Isle of Palms. And of course, our Community Wellness Fair, which the city administrator hit on a while ago. We're really real excited about that. Ghostly Tide Tales is October 14th. That'll be on the beach at Front Beach. And of course, our Halloween Carnival Golf Cart Parade will be on the 29th this year because we couldn't do it at dark. And in helping the chief and some education with golf carts, when we started this 2 years ago during COVID, we required registration proof of registration before we'd allow them to participate in the golf cart parade. So, and we've continued that, and we've kept a record. So we help in the city make sure that the golf carts instead of participating are insured and have the city permit, therefore releases the city of some liability, I think. Also, our Holiday Street Festival, we're working on that December the 3rd. And so we're really busy. Meditation, we will start that back September the 8th. That is on a Thursday. So it'll be at the public dock at 8 o'clock and then at the Recreation Center at 9 a.m. So we did find another instructor for that. And of course, the Farmers Market City Administrator hit on that as well. So that'll be on August the 18th. And other than that, it's pretty much normal operations. We're very busy, but staff's doing an awesome job. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer those
Where is the wellness fair?
at the rec center. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. That's right. Good.
Good.
All right, thank you. Next item, strategic plan, policy initiatives and priorities. Item A, livability, discussion of short-term rental regulations presented by the Planning Commission and discussion of public listening sessions in September. We had our joint meeting with the Planning Commission 6-8 weeks ago. Really have not had an opportunity to discuss the recommendations of the council and kind of take the next steps. So we'll have Douglas lead that conversation here in just a minute, but at our city council meeting, we talked about doing some resident sessions in September just to get feedback and do some education around what the planning commission's proposing on short-term rentals. So those we have tentatively set, and we'll have more announcement on our website for September 14th, 21st, and 28th at the rec center. We've engaged Rick Bradley, an IOP resident that council will know from our January retreat session, to facilitate and do those sessions for us. So more to come as far as design, layout, style. We just got him nailed down and the dates nailed down at this point. So questions on that before we get Douglas?
What were the dates again?
14th, 21st, and 28th of September.
And what time? Later.
To be determined.
To be determined. Okay.
A lot of logistics left to be worked out, but we'll have all the announcement on the website when we're ready to.
Will we have a chance to discuss and preview the format and how that's going to be taking place somehow before they actually take place?
Yeah, Rick Bradley has started putting an outline and some content together, John, to that question. We need to feed him some stuff for sure, but absolutely.
And just to expand, if I may, I think the idea is to have the same type of session in different days so that more people can be accommodated in the room. And if you can't make one day, you may be able to make another one. So I think that for clarity, it's not going to be a 3-session activity. It's just the same thing for 3 different times. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Rick will have some type of management reporting back to us, based on whatever the input is from those sessions. Because I think we'll be able to facilitate 100-ish in each session if we have that kind of turnout. So that's the hope.
I just wonder whether we should have one of these listening sessions at the Wild Dunes at the homeowners beach house. It might be more convenient for people to come.
Yeah, it's not very big is the only
Not very
problem.
big at all.
That's why we had it at the rec center, kind of middle of the island for everybody.
Okay.
The property owners, I mean, at best, you're talking 40-ish people in there.
Yeah.
I mean, at absolute best. So I think the rec is a better alternative.
Okay, well, I would just suggest we just hold it out. If at the end, the
Mm.
3rd session, we want to move it to
Yeah,
there. That
and we
might be
may
a
need a
suggestion.
4th session to
Okay.
kind of have a catch-all, to be quite honest with you. So let us keep working with Rick as far as content and format and style, and we'll come back to you with a little more plan, maybe at the council meeting.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Carr.
Thank you, Mayor. so as the mayor's mentioned, this has been handed to you all, but you haven't really had an opportunity to kind of talk about it or ask questions about it. So I was hoping that I would give kind of a high level overview, and you will have in your packet the summary of the Planning Commission's recommendations. And there are 9 bullets. There are 9 recommendations there, 9 specific items, but really most of those 9 are feeding details to the number one bullet. So we'll talk about their kind of the Planning Commission's thought process, what the recommendation is, and then we can get to whatever level of detail that you all want in terms of questions and answers. But I'll just go through those one by one, if that's okay. And just stop me if you have questions or if you want to have a discussion on any one of these particular points. The Planning Commission's primary, when they, as you all know, they pulled together a lot of data. They looked at the number of licenses, they looked at the size of houses, they kind of basically divided the island a number of different ways to look at trends in these short-term rentals. And there, at the end of their process, they felt like that the areas that had historically low numbers of rentals were the areas that were primarily impacted. They felt like the neighborhoods that had historically high numbers of short-term rentals coming and going of rentals in those areas wasn't kind of seen as a life-changing or a community-changing event. If a rental came in, it's almost as though they had learned to deal with those rentals. They were accustomed to them, and they didn't see them as out of place. It's really when they came into areas where there had never been a rental, and it kind of took that area and that neighborhood by surprise when it started to creep into these new areas. So that was a point of concern of theirs, of the Planning Commission's areas that had not had rentals historically. The other point of concern that they saw was this migration of rentals from certain areas to other areas. And this was definitely something that could be seen in the data. There were thoughts on, what was really driving that. Primarily, I think the Planning Commission felt like it was just economics pushing that, and that areas closer to the beaches had become so expensive that it didn't make financial sense to make those properties, or for those owners to rent those properties, as they weren't going to be positively cash flowing their investment on those. So they're seeing kind of a trend of moving away from the ocean front and into the back parts of the island where property values are more affordable and where it may make better financial sense to invest in those areas with an expectation that there would be a return on that investment. So that was a trend that they felt like was clearly happening and a point of concern for them. So the first bullet on this summary page says that their recommendation is to establish a cap in the number of rental licenses issued in 3 distinct zones on the island, and then leave portions of the island that had historically high numbers of rentals uncapped. I think you've seen the maps. Those areas that would be capped would be, as I've said, kind of 3rd row back. The first zone would end about at the commercial district. The second zone would be between 21st and 41st. The third zone would be from 41st all the way through to the Dewey's Inlet end. So there's a lot of detail after that cap question, but are there any questions about kind of the logic of the Planning Commission's recommendation, or just generally the cap and the 3 zones in an uncapped area? That really, that's the first bullet. That's really the meat of their recommendation. They talked a lot about different ways. You could kind of create one cap for the entire island. You could create just a residential cap, leave condos out. There are a number of ways that that could have been done. But at the end of the day, their recommendation was 3 areas, and a large portion of the housing stock being left uncapped.
If I'm reading this correctly, well, I'll just ask the question. Would the license transfer with the property, follow the property? So if the property's sold, it stays with the property?
It would, yes, that was a point that was brought up by the property, basically the short-term rental industry, those managers, because initially it wasn't written that way, and the Kiowa ordinance, which is a lot of what this is modeled on, is not that way. So they changed, they basically changed their recommendation based on the feedback that was given from the property managers on the island.
Douglas, can you tell us why why Kiowa went the other way?
So the other logic would be that if you have this list, say you have 50 people who've been sitting on a list waiting for a short-term rental license, assuming you've hit the cap, you've created this waiting list that would get created. The Kiowa's logic is the person who is on the top of that list, the next in line, should be given priority over the person who's showing up, from wherever, buying a property. They haven't been on a list. They are just buying a short-term rental. That was Kiowa's logic, that the person on the list should take precedent over the person showing up and just buying a rental.
Did they designate between residents or investors? In other words, if a resident wanted to, let's say you got a local operator that wants to basically wants to be grandfathered in to be able to hand it down to their family, that they're local operators that live on the island, they're residents. So I just didn't know if there's any conversation between, in other words, preserving a resident who wants to, a local operator, small operator, to hand the property down to their heirs versus an investor coming in out of town it's gonna go investor to investor
I
out of
think
town.
it did have to be an out of family transaction. So going to your kids was not seen as a sale, I believe. I think it was a third party that would trigger that. Planning Commission's thought was, after hearing the feedback, was that the house that has traditionally been a short-term rental is probably less disruptive to continue as being a rental than a new short-term rental popping up somewhere where there has not been one traditionally. So that was a big part of their feeling. The other point was that it was brought up as a major concern of the real estate industry.
Do you have another question?
No, I'm just thinking, I'll come
Okay.
back. Yeah, I'll come back to it.
To that point,
Hang on, Jan.
Just to follow up, I think it's the perspective of, Scott, you're talking about, Kiowa has it from the buyer's perspective is what they're looking at. And what we have here is from the seller's perspective. The seller views that license as a value added to the sale of their house. So it just depends on which way we want to look at it ourselves, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
The other thing, I've looked at this data, and one of the things I think that might make this a little more palatable is that the turnover rate in licenses for these single family homes that we're talking about, which is what, like 400 or so on the island in this.
Right.
in
In
this
those 3
categories?
zones, that's correct.
Yeah. The ones that have short-term rental licenses, about 20% of them turn over every year. So there's some flexibility in terms of that right off the bat. And then we're talking about a cap that would be higher than what we have today, so that no one would be blocked out now, and there would be additional licenses available.
Probably not to, and I failed to mention that, but their cap number is 10% higher than the 2020 number. I do believe that at least in the zone 2 area, we probably are already above the cap at this point.
Okay.
So that will be a detail as we.
Well, That's
fine
not
tune.
set yet, right? I mean, we can
Correct.
discuss that.
That's a
Okay,
recommendation.
I definitely recommend then I'll put it as a recommendation rather than a statement. Then I recommend that we set the cap higher than what it is now, so it will not affect anyone and will actually give us a little flexibility to grow into it, to get people used to that idea.
Yeah, that
Would
was
an
the
al-
intent of the
Would an
plan.
alternative, oh, go ahead.
Well, go ahead,
I
Scott.
was gonna say, would an alternative to that, we really have we have a capped and an uncapped zone on the island. If why do we have, if we're gonna go 10% above the 3 zones, why don't we just have it a capped zone and an uncapped zone, put them all together, you get your number, we go 10% above the 20, everybody's okay.
Yeah, so
Or at least treat it equally.
Yeah, the three
Yeah.
are then treated equally, and you've got your pool of, you got your college zones, but you've got your capped region on the island and your uncapped region, then we can just evaluate and track that, as opposed to having 3 distinct zones
Yeah.
that are managed individually.
the logic to the planning commission's logic for 3 zones specifically was there is one zone and it's between 21st and 41st that is being impacted. the
Targeted.
most. They're being, it's having the most increase. The other 2 zones and obviously the uncapped zone don't really have a problem right now. So when you boil it down to the problem area, it's really between 21st and 41st behind
But the
Palm.
problem is they're going from very few rentals to some rentals.
That's correct.
They don't have as many as the other 2 zones yet. So it depends on whether you see that as a problem or not. And that's really up to the residents to tell us, I think.
Blair.
Kind of suggest to you, Douglas, that instead of attaching the rental license to the property, attach it to the structure. Because you're going to have an issue of it being on the lot, and people are going to sell old rental houses for lot value because you can tear that house down and put up a big house. Designed as a rental house. And so do it to the structure, and if the structure is, more than whatever percent renovated, then it gets kicked out of the protection.
So does that sort of goes against the tear down a 3-bedroom and put up a 10-bedroom?
Correct.
Yeah, right. Great. That's a good idea. That's a good idea, Blaine.
John, you-
Yeah, I've got a couple. I guess it's important, I think, for people to understand where this is all coming from to begin with. And this issue came up last council, right? It was sent to the planning commission by the last council to look at.
Yeah, about a year ago,
Yeah.
actually. Yeah.
And I think the genesis of it was really from the residents to begin with. If you remember, we went through a strategic planning exercise last year. And the strategic plan specifically has an element on here around protect residents' quality of life from impact of short-term accommodations. And that was directly from residents' impact. This was a very high priority issue for our residents. And so this isn't something that we just dreamed up. This is coming from the residents. It's important to them. And I think that's important for people to understand how this is even on our agenda at this point. But I think at the end, I think we have 3 decisions to make around this, and we've talked about some of it, how the cap's going to occur, whether it's in zones or not zones, and where the cap is. I think we're going to have this transferability issue, whether it goes or doesn't go with the property. And I think the third one that we haven't talked yet about, and I think we'll hear in these resident sessions, is around the 4%. If you have, if you're a resident, many feel like they should have the ability to rent their house the 72 days a year or whatever the limit is, and not fall into the cap. So I think those are the 3 issues that we're going to have to wrestle with at the end of the day to come up with what the final solution is. And I think that's what's important to hear from residents in these sessions as well. But those are the comments I have. I don't know if I'm prepared to say one way or another at this point where I feel, but I think this is an important issue for the community. This last piece, I would say, this is only one part of the livability. I think the code enforcement is equally as important. And I want to personally put some energy into that area. And I've talked to Desiree about it, and I'd like to meet with the chief and the new code enforcement officer. But I think we need to do some work around that as well. It's not just doing, eliminating or reducing the amount of short-term rentals doesn't solve the problem. We need short-term rentals. We have short-term rentals, but I think we have to do a better job with code enforcement on it. So those are the comments that I have around the subject.
Yeah, and I think, John, to your point, I mean, I think we're a long way from getting the policy or changing the recommendations. You know, this is just a discussion to kind of keep the ball moving, and we have not had an opportunity to spend some time on what the planning commission brought to us. So this was kind of that opportunity. I think September session to be critical, to your point, on what we get from the residents. You know, we, Dr. McLeod from College of Charleston last month, you know, kind of gave us a macro view, you know, from a short-term rental community, and you know, I thought that was pretty valuable information. So other questions or comments? Yeah, Kevin.
Yes, Mayor, I totally agree, and I mentioned it the last time that getting the residents to come and speak about this is vital. This is a property rights issue to me. And you start capping, you start creating zones, you're picking winners and losers, and you're potentially going to get a ton of lawsuits. So it's a property rights issue with me, and we really got to be careful with this.
Just let me say one comment real quick. I think to John's point, I think to add to what the planning commission has come back with, you know, I think enforceability is another big cornerstone of this. I wouldn't mind adding that somehow on this recommendation list that we just want to put into the mix.
Yeah, I wanted to reinforce what Councilmember Popson said too. I think it's a property rights issue as much as anything. And I think a minimum of 3 resident meetings is going to be a good thing for us to have, because right now I think there's a lot of misconception out there in the residences, you know, the neighborhood, as to what all of this has been about and where the information's coming from. I know the planning commission spent a lot of time on this and did some really good work, but there's still, I think, just so many people that live on this island that don't fully understand the possible implications here. So looking forward to that.
Jen.
One last thing, and that is to put this in perspective. Right now, our island is about a third permanent residents, a third second homes, and a third short-term rentals. Now, in comparison, Folly Beach is about 50% short-term rentals. So the question that we're really asking is, what kind of community do we want to be going forward? We now, in where we are now, we have time to consider it without difficulty. I think we can come to a solution that will make this community going forward what we want it to be. And I think that's the biggest question that we're answering with this.
There's some details clearly, you know, down in the recommendations, but I think at this point, they're just details, and I think there'll be a lot of modifications and tweaks as we move forward, but very useful to me.
Scott, you have another question or not?
No, I'm just listening.
Happy to be here.
I'm happy to be here.
Desiree, anything else from your?
No, I guess our next step will be to help support and prepare for these listening sessions, gather all that feedback from the community, and help you all shape some type of policy directive regarding short-term rentals based on that feedback and where you all are.
Because I think to John's point, you know, how we design these listening sessions, whether it winds up being 3, 4, or 5, whatever it winds up being, you know, the output from that, we need to ask the right questions going in to get the output that we're looking for, just from resident feedback. So we'll shoot to have something back, John, at council for some structure around that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
Yep. Next item is environmental discussion of draft local comprehensive beach management plan. Desiree, you up?
Yes, so this is going to be somewhat new for a lot of you new folks on council. The state legislature passed several years ago at the Beachfront Management Act, and it establishes that all ocean beachfront communities have to develop a local comprehensive beach management plan. That you have to prepare it and then update it every 10 years, review it every 5 years. The city worked on this project back in 2016 and had a plan approved by OCRM and adopted by the city council in 2017. So now in 2020, we are at our 5-year review mark. The beachfront, the local comprehensive beach management plan has to incorporate analysis about 10 different elements. And these are all on the website. You can look at it, but essentially you're looking at an analysis of beach erosion, any beach renourishment activity that the city has done. You're looking at setback lines, building plans, any type of policy that the city has enacted that impacts any of that. You're incorporating how the beach management plan that the city has impacts any turtles or any other endangered species. There's a component associated with public access to the beach. So there's an inventory of all the beach access paths that the city has and maintains, in addition to a parking component. So earlier this year, we engaged Chris Jones, who is a PhD consultant that we hired back in 2016 to help us develop this document. We've hired him for the review. You'll have received from me about a couple weeks ago the draft that we've been working on at staff level. I think, I've talked with some of you who have had questions or suggestions, and I've been it's been very helpful. We will be incorporating those changes to that document. We'll share them with the staff at OCRM for their internal review. We'll answer any questions or make any adjustments before the final document goes on public comment. I anticipate the public comment to be about 30 days. That's usually typical. What will happen then is they'll document all public comment received, come back to us, and whether there needs to be any clarification or answering any questions, we would certainly do that. And then it would be up to City Council to adopt a resolution adopting the revised local comprehensive beach management plan.
So this will be by the end of the year, we'll have something wrapped up.
That is
Without
the
doubt,
expectation.
yeah.
Yes, sir.
There's not a hearing, right? It's just a public comment section.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah, Desiree, why the change by OCRM in regards to putting it out for public comment to begin with versus never doing that before?
That is a question I have asked repeatedly and don't seem to get a straight answer. I think that this is the first time since the Beach Management Reform Act that happened in I believe it was 2017 or 2018. It's when they changed some parameters about the law regarding the policy on retreat. So this is the first in this year, I think it's the first year where most of the beach communities are going through the 5-year review process. So they didn't really have a policy established about what the review entailed. Because the law just says local communities have to review the plan every 5 years and has to be go through the approval process every 10 years. So we started this conversation and asking them, okay, what's the difference between the 5-year review and the 10-year update? And they went back and forth amongst themselves, trying to figure it out. I suppose I'll be frankly pretty honest, I don't think they knew what it was. And I think in the spirit of transparency and public engagement, they decided to put it up for public comment just as a 10-year period. So it's nothing unlike what we kind of went through in 2017. I was just a little surprised that it seems like a very similar process that we're going to have to go through in 10 years rather than 5.
Does public comment also mean that there could be other state agencies that weigh in on this?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And the public.
Okay.
Folly just recently went through this review and had public comment. I have not yet read the public comment that they received, but nothing that I think impacted the final approval. End result, yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next item, public services. One update on SCDOT's IOP connector study. Desiree, I think that's a quick update.
Yes, so as you know, our K&K, the consultant that was hired by SCDOT to conduct the study and develop alternative configurations for the connector. Completed the traffic count collection a couple weeks ago. I reported that last month that they were going to do it in mid-July. So luckily they picked a sunny weekend and week. We've had so much rain. I was worried that the counts were going to be a little off, but they were done in a really good week. Our next check-in date and checking meeting with DOT and the consultant will be in September. We're expecting a final draft of the report with the alternatives to be completed between October and November. Our milestone would be a council presentation in November, where DOT and the consultant would be coming, presenting the alternatives, the analysis that they've conducted about the current configuration, followed by a public comment period. We talked about putting all of these alternatives up on a website where people can view, provide feedback on. Because this would be falling around the holiday season in December. They're going to be extending that period through January, hopefully getting more participation from the community. One thing I did want to add, so we can constantly have our check-ins with our traffic engineer, Jennifer Bill. We had one last Friday. I've asked Councilmember Anderson to join me in those calls. It's been really helpful to have her feedback on it. We noticed, actually, Ms. Anderson, in one of our conversations, had highlighted some of the concerns that we're seeing on rifle range with the utilization of that lane when you're exiting the island. There's a lot of traffic backed up on rifle range to the connector, and we think that there's not a good utilization of that right lane. Usually people just think that they can use that just to turn on rifle range, but you can also, actually use it all the way, as you all know, down to 17. So we discussed that with our traffic engineer. She discussed it with SCDOT, and they've expanded the RK&K scope to include a lane utilization assessment in that area to see what can we do to encourage operators to maximize that right-hand lane at the end of the connector. So I will say this whole exercise continues to expand, and I think we're going to see a lot of really good results from it. In addition to that, they're also doing the assessment of the stop sign at Waterway. We all think it's really funny why that's there and shouldn't be. The stop sign should be at 25th Avenue, not at Waterway. So that's something that they're also looking at as part of the study. And we should be hearing back soon on solutions on how to change that.
And
It would be very simple. I would just move the stop sign from one end to the other, but it's not.
It's like we get into analysis paralysis with this thing, and we just keep analyzing and analyzing
Yeah.
and not doing anything.
Yeah,
This
but this-
timeline has kind of slipped from what we originally talked to them about.
Mhm.
We,
Fall was always the deliverable on the options. So I mean,
Yeah.
even though we've had
but we're
scope.
getting
for-
into winter now.
Well, no, I mean,
Yeah,
they're
it's gonna
coming
go into
back,
January, right?
they're coming
Now
back
we're-
here in November to present options.
But
either
what we
October or
said is we
November.
wanted to have a solution in place before next season. So
That's
that's
still
going to, timeline is starting to get pretty tight to get anything.
That's
Yeah.
still possible. So, yeah, we should emphasize that, but we're
Mhm.
still within the possibility of getting things restriped
Yeah,
before
and
next
John, I
season.
think if we put this thing out for public comment in November, pick a time frame, yeah, and hopefully we'll have quick and a lot of feedback. There's not gonna be any need to keep pushing it out, from a feedback standpoint, so. All right, Desiree, we'll keep going. Discussion of entering into an automatic aid agreement with Mount Pleasant for fire protection, or chief, who's.
All right, yeah, Chief,
Chief.
and we had some questions from council last month, and we have a little bit more information. Chief and I have continued to meet to continue to hash out what this would mean and what it would look like for the city. So he's going to share with you a little bit more information since last month and entertain any questions.
Sure. Thank you. So we met with Consolidated Dispatch and ran a study over a 12-month time period, historical, and what that would be call volume wise if our department responded into Mount Pleasant and into those areas of automatic aid. And so what we found is over a 12-month time frame that we would be into Mount Pleasant in that area from Porsche's Bluff across Highway 17, the Ivy Hall subdivision, which is directly across from there, including going down towards Snee Farm and into the Vinning Road area. Those areas are where we were able to pull the data because those were the highest percentages or chances of us being called. And so dispatch was able to put everybody in their station, City of Charleston, us, North Charleston, and run their Mount Pleasant's call volume to see where our ladder truck or battalion chief would respond. We found that in that 12-month period, there would have been 23 structure fires would have responded to, 1 vehicle entrapment, and 236 fire alarms. Now, all those structure fires weren't working fires. Some of those were pot on a stove, the majority of them, or arcing electrical, where things were isolated, very quickly. So in doing that research, we took that research and met with Chief Mixon and his Deputy Chief of Administration, Chief Barnes, and Chief Hathaway and I sat down with them. We reviewed the numbers, the call volume, their needs, our needs, and discussed those data points. We also discussed fire alarms. Currently, they are looking at reducing the number of units they respond to fire alarms, which would cause us to respond over into Mount Pleasant even less. How they respond to fire alarms is the first due unit responds with their lights and siren. The other units gear up, respond quickly, but they respond in non-emergent status. So that means they do not have lights and sirens. And so that would be us here, unless all their units were busy. Our unit would be responding code 2, which is no lights and no sirens. So we looked at that data. We compared their needs for us for a structure fire, for example. We looked at what we would receive. We found that they would come over here, obviously fewer times, but we would actually, on those times when they were coming, they would be providing upwards of 15, 16 people on 5 or 6 apparatus. Right now, we're getting 2 apparatus and a battalion chief. So when we receive aid, we would get it in spades, but we would respond over there. Many times would be canceled before we would get across the Isle of Palms connector. So we crunched that data. I've also, Ms. Fregoso and I have been looking at all this data, talking about all the positives and potentially negatives, trying to kick the tires on the whole thing. I looked at other research, other articles. I've also talked to all the fire chiefs in the automatic aid group, with the exception of the chief at James Island, Chief Seabolt. I haven't had a chance to connect with him, but all the fire chiefs have been very welcoming with sharing data. And Chief Knitzer, I've talked to him on 2 separate occasions because Johns Island is similar to us with 2 stations on Kiowa, like we have 2 stations here. And Sullivan's Island, I haven't had a chance to connect with Chief Stiff, but they've been responding automatic aid with Mount Pleasant. They have 1 station and they've been responding automatic aid in a limited geographic area, but over a 10-year time frame. And the automatic aid group started back in 2012, and they've been doing that over 10 years, and none of them have left the group. So you're still doing the research. We still like having it on the agenda for discussion. We want to make sure you're comfortable. We answer all your questions. And we're prepared to continue with research or move forward however you feel that you recommend that we move forward. Any questions?
So what is your recommendation? That we do automatic aid? Is that right?
Well, my recommendation is Fregoso and I are, continuing to get more research and data. I want to make sure that our staff is comfortable and that you're comfortable, but how the data is being presented to me and looking at it, through all different sides and talking to everybody, anecdotally, all the other things that are positive, sharing training, sharing resources. There's a lot of other opportunity other than call volume, response where we could benefit. So yes, my recommendation as of this moment from everything that I've seen is that we, consider entering in an automatic aid agreement with the group.
And it doesn't seem like there's a downside, because if we are overwhelmed by the calls, we can always back out, isn't it, in future years? Is that correct?
Ms. Fregoso and I looked at that, and we would propose something similar to what Mount Pleasant is doing, where we would do a 12-month, beta test, 12-month trial period, run it real time, look at the data, be able to give you feedback on a monthly basis. And if we see that this does not work for us as a municipality, then we'd have that ability to pull back from that and say, hey, this doesn't work for us. We're going to continue mutual aid, but we're not going to do automatic aid. That's correct.
That's good to be. Okay. Thank you, John.
Just briefly, what are the negatives? I mean, you mentioned the positives. I think I realized those. But what are the negatives?
Well, the negatives, there would be, we would have more calls that we would be responding to. So that would be potentially an increase in fuel costs. We don't anticipate that would be something that we would have to re-budget for on a large scale. We view that would be sustainable, increase in potentially vehicle maintenance, but we don't view that also as being a large piece of the puzzle there. Ms. Myers had posed a question, how many times are we going to go over, what does that look like? And so we got that data as best we could. Mr. Hahn had the concern about, the resiliency and redundancy, and that was our biggest concern. What does that look like? So we have 2 units at Fire Station 2 down by the marina. And so in order for those units to be pulled, it would have to be something very significant. What the auto aid group does is as units are pulled, then they backfill. With dispatching multiple battalion chiefs on an incident, typically that 3rd battalion chief, how it operates is they will look at everything from a global resource management point of view. And as they see units or areas get to become thin, for instance, us, let's say in Isle of Palms, then they would cancel our unit and have the ability to add a unit from somewhere else that could be not as impactful on their service delivery. One thing the group does really well is when units come to assist from outside of jurisdiction, those are the first units released. So there's a lot of situational awareness that our battalion chiefs and captains are currently doing now that they didn't do in the past. At 8 a.m. every morning, they get on the call, on a conference call with City of Charleston, North Charleston, James Island, Johns Island, St. Andrews, Mount Pleasant. And they say, hey, we have, 2 jet skis out of service, or we'll say we have our tower trucks out of service. We have this engine. So right off the rip at the beginning of the shift, that resource management psyche starts, and then what's available starts. Mutual aid, how we do it now, we manually request, we say, hey, could you send us X? With automatic aid, we're guaranteed of those resources being dispatched. We could ask and through mutual, and they may not be available. And if they're not available, dispatch comes back and says, well, no units are available. That Mount Pleasant Battalion Chief says they're not available. Where do you want to go? And then we have to pick a department and say, okay, could you try City of Charleston? And therein lies the delay. But those were the questions from Ms. Myers and Mr. Hahn. We had those same questions. And so those have been answered to our satisfaction in the fire department. But we're all about research and data. So we can do whatever, the council desires. And we want to make sure Ms. Fregoso's is comfortable and Douglas is comfortable and our citizens are comfortable.
So what's next, Chief? Is there additional data or additional?
Yes, I mean, there's a lot more to consider. Chief and I have had a couple meetings about it. I put together a list of a lot of questions that I had. Still haven't gone through that with the chief. There's a lot to look at in terms of reciprocity, looking at our our standard operating guidelines and our standards and those of those communities that would be responding to us. Another big piece that I think is very important as part of this process is public information, making sure that the public understands what this means. Making sure that they have the information to understand, I guess, what's happening, because you might be in front of your house and you see a Town of Mount Pleasant fire engine responding to a call in your neighborhood, and why the heck is Mount Pleasant here or not? So I think there's a lot that still needs to be done in that regard. And more questions that I have to get comfortable moving forward. From the research and the information that we've discussed and analyzed so far, I think it's the right path. You all know me, I'm all about pilot programs and trying things out and being very measured with our risk taking. And I think this would be something that could certainly benefit the city significantly. However, there are some things that we need to be prepared for and make sure that we mitigate as much as we can from the front end. And so we're still in that process. I felt like this was big enough of an issue that I wanted to, as we internally go through this process of understanding and getting comfortable with it, that we include you all along the way. As you all represent the community and certainly could have a lot of questions and things that may be blind spots for us that you all can help fill. So we're going to continue. Hopefully we can come back in September with more information and a copy of what the agreement would look like. Still questions about insurance, liability, costs regarding personnel, equipment, additional training that we would need. So we're still going through that in a very deliberate way. Okay.
Chief, you're up next again. Discussion regarding adoption of Chapter 1 of the Fire Code. There's a sample ordinance in your package. Chief, you want to, I know we've talked about this a little bit, but.
Sure. And this one is, to Councilman Ward's point about, efficiency and how that fits in our strategic plan for, I think it's priority, where it really fits is priority 3, goal D, to optimize operational expenses. How can we be more efficient and be proactive? And so right now, what we have a challenge with is with not adopting Chapter 1 in its entirety. We do not have any enforcement power for the recommendations that Fire Marshal Stafford makes when he goes to a commercial occupancy, when he goes to a business. Technically, we do not have that ability. We can only recommend. And so what he's finding is he's going and suggesting that these recommendations be made as per the code. But since we do not have the teeth, he's having to go back multiple times and make these suggestions. And so that does two things. That puts the property owner at a higher risk because those modifications are not made. And then 2, Travis Stafford, our fire marshal, is having to not inspect other areas or get to other work because he's having to return multiple times to the businesses. He's never written a ticket. I don't think he's ever had a bad day. He's always very pleasant. He's all about education. So that won't change. But the city of Casey, outside of Columbia, the city of Greenville, in upstate, they have both adopted Chapter 1 in its entirety. The state has put that on us as the authority having jurisdiction to handle those items. And it is our recommendation, after doing research over the last few months, as one of the first things that we started discussing with Douglas and with Ms. Fregoso on, okay, this is really something we need to address, and this is why. We've contacted the state fire marshal, and so we've definitely done our due diligence, just as we're doing with automatic aid, similar, that we need to adopt Chapter 1 in its entirety.
What's next on this one from a?
This will be presented to you on the form of an ordinance for first reading at your follow-up at your August meeting.
questions for Chief?
And you have the draft of the red line in your packets today.
Chief, thank you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you all.
That's personnel, discussion of creating a public relations coordinator position. This is a budgeted item for us. Desiree, I know you've done some legwork and multiple conversations, so a quick update.
Yes, just a quick update. Y'all know that we have been working in some capacity about how to come to fruition one of the strategic planning priorities that the city adopted earlier this year, which was to develop a consistent, timely, comprehensive communications plan. And I think that we continue to see a growing demand for quicker information, quicker response when it comes to the website, social media, et cetera. So I think this is a unique opportunity for the city to create new connections with our community and really be able to deliver up to the expectations that the community has. This is something that we've, I'll admit, we've kind of struggled about how to best approach it. In the past, we've worked with outside consultants on specific issues that the city has had with public relations consultants, and it's been helpful. My first reaction when we started looking at this was that the most cost-efficient, cost-effective way was to look at it at outsourcing. However, the more we look at it, think about it, talk about it, and fully understand our need and the expectation and what we would like for this to look like, we come to the realization, and this is something that I've discussed with all my department heads, is it really needs to be somebody that's embedded in the staff that can develop all this content and develop a consistent strategy among departments, not just us creating content and having somebody put it in a pretty format and pushing it out. So that's why I've come to the presenting this to you as an initial conversation preliminary and kind of letting you all know where I'm kind of leading this with is creating a position. We all heard Helen Hill, the CEO of CVB, when she came before you all a couple weeks ago, talking about also creating and providing some support to the city in the form of a liaison that can not only work with the CVB, but also with the chamber and maybe beef up some of the communication that's directed at tourism or people that are not non-residents. And the more I think about this, I see this as an opportunity to bridge both of them and potentially have some cost share from the CVB so that this position could not only deal with external communications to our community, but also from a tourism angle with the chamber, with the CVB. Briefly spoke about it with Helen last week, and she seemed really excited and eager to explore that and saw that as an opportunity. We heard some discussion about the Kiowa model when it comes to the CVB. I have talked with my colleague there and counterpart Stephanie Tillerson, she's the administrator, and they have their liaison is a concierge type person. Seems like an entry level job, and it's very minimal what they currently do. That's what it sounded to me, and I don't think that that'll meet our needs. I think that if we can create a position and hire somebody with a communications background, somebody that can really take this role and make it their own, I think it would be a neat thing for the city. Regardless of that, I think that the communication piece and our needs with, providing information to the community in a timely, consistent way is a need that I think we all can agree on exists today and something that we need to address quickly. That's something that, all departments feel very excited about. As you all know, we have a very fragmented system right now. You have a ton of people, whoever has time and whoever can write something up will do it. And it's just not I don't think it meets the expectations that I have, and certainly what I hope you and the community, I know you don't have. We have $60,000 in the budget for this. We've been looking at examples of job descriptions and some of the things that we would like for this position to take on. So I'll be drafting that with HR manager Janice very soon, and coming up to before you all for to approve a position, because it would be a new head that would be here, general government, but one that I think we really need.
Rusty.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Couple of questions, Desiree. Are you thinking that this would be a dual role? I mean, one that would be not only a public relations coordinator, but also a liaison along with the CVB, as was mentioned last month?
Yes, and I've seen some models in other communities that have done it that way. I certainly think that that's the right way to start. If we think that, years from now, those two roles evolve to something different, I think we can at that point deal
Yeah.
with it. But yes, that's how I am envisioning today.
I'm not necessarily against that myself personally, but I also think, I know part of the discussion last month, particularly with Helen Hill, was that they could fund that role themselves. I don't see that happening. I think this is something that we have budgeted. This ought to be a city employee.
Yes, this would be a city employee. However, I think that if they're willing to fund in some capacity a role that's specific to IOP for the liaison part, I think we can incorporate that into this position and then just support the expenses of that position with the CVB. Let's say 30% of the work that they'd be doing would be related to tourism and CVB work.
But-
Then
but
30%
it's-
could be funded for
Yeah,
that.
but as long as whoever's in this position knows that their loyalty lies with the city.
They would be reporting to me.
Yeah, they would be reporting to you.
That's correct.
And of course, on the public relations coordinator, having worked in private industry all the many years that I did, we need to make sure we not only have someone who's effective in reacting to those situations that come up very quickly, but we need to have a very proactive approach too. And, I'm not sure that you're probably going to have some sort of lifeline, I'm thinking, in the background, that you still would need to have some sort of professional agency with even a higher level of expertise that you may have to fall back on in some point, to kind of help,
Mhm.
just from past experience.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sean.
Yeah, I think this is a great idea, but the caution that I have is the role, a public relations role, and the role at least that I envisioned for the CVB liaison are really two different skill sets. So I think when you draft the job role or description, you need to break out those two pieces. And I think as you look for the person, it's going to take a special kind of skill set to meet those, because what I envision for that liaison to the CVB is not just a liaison where they're talking to them, but they're really helping drive our brand where, and it goes to this livability to me. We ought to be marketing or branding the island to attract families and certain kind of visitors to the island, because those are the ones that are less likely to cause issues and livability issues with residents. They're spending more money. They'll visit our restaurants on the island. They're not going to, like I said, at King Street, staying till 2 a.m. and then coming back. They're staying they're spending money on the island. And I think it takes a special kind of skill set to market that, brand that, where we're going to advertise to get that kind of a visit to the island. And so I just caution that I think it's a great idea. And I think it will take a special skill set though to meet both roles. For public relations is different than the marketing piece to me. And I think from the funding standpoint, I don't know about CVB funding. Can't we just fund it with the 30% money? I mean, it may be a nuance, because instead of giving the CVB whatever the money is, we're paying that, we're keeping that piece to pay this employee, because it's tourism related, the advertising related again.
I could look into that. My first reaction is I don't think we can with the 30%. We certainly could with the 65%, which we have a little bit more flexibility on, but I can certainly look into that. And the idea of this dual role combination, kind of came about from that last meeting and looking at the Kiowa model. And I know that other communities have done it successfully. So, if it's not something that works for us and we want to do something different, certainly I'm not married to any approach. Certainly the priority is going to be looking for a public relations coordinator to join our team. If for some reason we find the right person that can serve that in that dual capacity and there's enough time, 40-hour week that could be devoted to both roles. And certainly, we all wear multiple hats and we've been really lucky with our hiring recently. So I think that we can try that route and just see how it works.
Yep.
I'd just like some clarification, I guess, about what kind of person you're thinking about, because I'm not sure $60,000 is going to cover everything. First of all, this would not be a person that would manage our website.
The idea would be somebody to manage our website, would
Okay.
manage social media accounts, would be constantly developing press releases, manage a monthly newsletter, provide information about, current projects and just keeping a constant messaging out there about what the city's doing, how the city's enhancing quality of life.
Okay, and when you say manage the website, they're not a techie person, or you're expecting technical skills as well, so they could go in and other than do a complete overhaul of our website, maybe massage it so it's easier to use. That's one of the things I'm concerned about.
Certainly somebody who has that expertise can come in and start evaluating the systems and portals that we have and make suggestions. Our website today is not very difficult to manage. You'd be surprised that who of us sometimes do it and are able to do it. So, but yeah, I think that having somebody with that background and that expertise would really serve us well. It could look like a different website in a few years if that's the case.
Okay, and then it would not be exclude the lobbying and the grant writing that we have now.
No.
From other resources. That's
No,
totally separate.
That's separate. And the $60,000, it's what we have in the budget we place that as a placeholder in FY23 for this initiative. It did not contemplate it being a full-time position. When you add fully loaded costs, we haven't, like I said earlier, we're developing a job description, that'll be incorporated into our grade and pay, our grade and steps, not a step plan, that's public safety, but our compensation model, we'll know exactly what the cost will be. And that's for future conversation. Certainly would be more than $60,000, but that's what we currently have allocated for that.
Sounds like we need it. Thank you.
Scott.
Yeah, I just, so it sounds like this might be a part-time, may not start out as a full-time position or not sure yet.
No,
I guess my,
full-time position.
okay. And then my other question would be, I think maybe it would just be helpful to see what the job description looks like, because whether it's media relations or putting the website together or content, those can be very, very different skill sets. So I think once, maybe we see the job description and find out where that position is going to be pointed. Are they going to be doing crisis communication, media relations, dealing with the media? That's a different skill set. So
I was hoping to see some head nodding so that we can continue down this path.
yeah,
You got head nod.
Yeah.
All right.
let's get the job description.
Questions? Comments? Good. Desiree, anything else? on that?
No, sir.
Other items for discussion. Item 1, discussion about parking regulations for shared lot under city control, or I guess potentially under city control. Desiree?
Yes, so as part of the discussions that are being had regarding the marina assignment and in anticipation of taking over the control of that shared parking lot, we've developed some drafts about the rules and regulations that we are exploring for the use and management of that lot. We're also entered into some conversations with The third party contractor that would be, is currently managing some of the parking there, collecting payment, enforcing those parking regulations. And we've shared the draft of those rules and regulations with the tenants, and certainly eager to hear their feedback on it. But other than that, we don't have anything else to update on.
Define tenant, please.
Both the restaurant tenant and the marina operator and future marina operator, potential future marina operator. Certainly, very encouraging all of our tenants to provide as much feedback to us as possible.
Are there going to be any sessions where they're all getting together and providing that feedback, or at what point is that all happening?
Well, that happens at the staff level. So we've reached out a couple of times and would certainly entertain any meeting format that would be favorable to everybody so that we can have these discussions and hash out and make sure that whatever's in place benefits all tenants.
And I think, Scott, to your question, I think it's a staff conversation that would eventually wind its way back here
That's right.
through a recommendation like we've seen in the last month or so.
Yeah, I just want to ensure that all of the tenants and everybody has equal input into that. It sounds like that's in the works, or is it in the works?
Yeah.
Do we know when those meetings are taking place?
We haven't, we've reached out a couple of times and meetings have not yet been confirmed. I think there's an issue with scheduling and who wants to participate. We'll continue those conversations.
Will this start with the memorandum of understanding
That's
that's in place?
Yeah, so the draft rules and regulations that we put together, the starting point was the MOU that's currently in place between the restaurant and the marina operator for the management of that lot.
Claire, you good?
I've changed my mind.
Withdrawal. Just item 2, discussion of issuing a request for proposal for city attorney and assistant city attorney. This was asked to be put on by Blair. Just a quick way of background. These are annual appointments that will so designate in the first meeting in January. But we've done an RFP in 2018 and in 2020 for city attorney and assistant city attorney. So it's kind of time again, if you will, if we're on an every 2-year cycle. Not that we have to be, but that's what we've done in the last couple of years. My opinion, this is not a stone throw at all. I think the appointments have generally been kind of a friendly appointment, if you will. It's somebody's left and they were in the firm and then we appointed them. I think the role of this city attorney, and we may all differ on this to some extent, but this person has to be steeped in municipal law and protocol. They act as parliamentarian during our city council meetings. They're an absolute resource from a staff standpoint. We see them at city council meetings, but where the rubber meets the road is day to day with staff and getting ordinances done and contracts reviewed and whatever else needs to happen from a day to day running of the city. Access and speed of response is critical. We're a small staff and we need somebody to respond quickly. And sometimes you get that, sometimes you don't, when you go to a larger firm. But, my view of this role as a city attorney, they're really the hub and, they're for all of those pieces that we just talked about. But when we need something around a lease or a constitutionality or zoning or whatever else we need, they're charged to go hire that individual. So, they're not a jack of all trades, so to speak, but they are definitely steeped from a municipality standpoint. So, Blair, I don't know if you have any opening comments you want to make to putting this on the agenda, but really, we've done it the last every other year timeframe, just looking for council to give a head nod, and we would go do an RFP if that's what we want to do this fall. So we could be ready for an appointment in January. So,
Yeah, I had conversations with a number of people on council about this and was asked what I saw a city attorney's role as. And attorneys generally season as they get older because they have more experience and then they therefore develop judgment about how to deal with certain issues. And so I see a city attorney as the old gray hair guy that knows how to react
Or gal.
knows how to react to a myriad of situations and has the relationship with the legal community to be able to pick lawyers as needed to fill certain slots.
Yeah.
And it's 2 years in time.
Yeah, and it's really an annual appointment, just our decision on how often we want to RFP it or look at it.
Is for the folks that are new, is it possible to see have the last RFP distributed so that we can see how that was, what that was?
Yeah,
Pardon me?
the website, there's a page on the website under
Oh.
government.
In other
that
words, go to the
shows-
website, is that what you're telling me?
It's under government, there's requests for bids and proposals, so all bids and all RFPs and all RFBs are posted on the website back to 2013, I believe.
All right.
But it's, Scott, to your question, I mean, it's fairly simple RFP. I mean, it's what we need from a city standpoint, I think. You know, and there, Blair, I think to your point, there are benefits to certainly being with a larger firm. There are benefits to being with a smaller firm too, just from a turnaround standpoint and access and, you know, the number of hours that we get from a support standpoint. So I just think all that has to go in the mix.
Well, absolutely. And I'm not suggesting large firm or small.
No, I
firm.
know, but you didn't say that. You seasoned, I think was your word.
Seasoned.
Yeah.
Right here.
So if we go down this path, what would be protocol from your viewpoint? The personnel committee that's sat there do we form an ad hoc committee to look at the RFPs and come back with a recommendation? What?
Is that a question to who?
That's anybody that wants to answer. Jimmy just answered. He said, say more.
You understand?
Got it.
Got it.
I would think, Mayor, that it would be helpful for you to appoint 3 people potentially to bring the information to full council.
That's an ad hoc, right?
That's an ad hoc.
So
I would recommend that we go with existing committees that we already have in place.
So
for
the
these
personnel
things.
committee.
Well, yeah, and if we have something in public
Well,
works,
either
or
way.
you go to public work, since we haven't totally
It's a good idea.
thrown the committee structure out yet, I think we ought to stick with the committees that we already have for the various different, wherever they would fit. My view.
Agreed.
Mr. Mayor, I agree as well. I mean, I think it makes sense that if you're gonna have a committee that weighs in them, let's go back to our committees that are still technically in place. We're in a test mode here with workshop, so it would just make sense to me that we go back to personnel committee.
Who's on the person?
John, Jan, and Scott.
That's why they're not there.
Desiree, what else do we need from a directional standpoint? You good? I mean, it sounds like you use the personnel committee. Am I hearing yes? Let's go ahead and do an RFP since we've done the last even numbered of years.
This
Sounds
would
good.
be the year that we would normally
Yes.
do that, right?
Yeah.
2-year cycle.
Just, that's pretty recent history, quite honestly, but yes,
Yeah.
And our current attorney is through the end of this year.
correct. Sorry.
And the assistant attorney.
And
And
assistant
assistant,
attorney, yeah, good point. Blair, do you have something? No?
No, sir.
Okay.
So I guess my next step would be to have a conversation with Councilmember Bogosian, who was the chair of the personnel committee, so to start thinking through logistics of how we pursue that.
Yeah, and I think just to Scott's question, maybe we just push out the last RFP, Desiree, just to council so people can see it.
It's on the website under 2020, top 2, city and assistant.
You might need to draw me a map, Jan.
Yeah.
I will
Just kidding,
Site
just
map.
kidding.
Well, I still haven't found the marina.
I'll get
license,
there.
so
I will
I'm
attach
just proud.
I will attach it to an email. How about that?
Thank you, Desiree.
You're welcome.
All right, next item, financial review. There's not a whole lot of update here. July is our first month of the fiscal year. So there's not much revenue and or expense, but Debbie, take it away.
That's pretty much in a nutshell. Not a whole lot of revenue. In general fund, $509,000 made up of revenues coming through the building department, licenses and permits, and then $200,000 in parking. Expenditures in the general fund are at 8%. The target's 8.3%, so things are looking good there. And for all the other funds, basically the only income is interest related, with the exception of the marina where there's some lease income. So we'll just talk about cash really quick. The total cash balance is about 32 million. Most of that is deposited at the LGIP, and the interest rate is 1.7225%. As I've mentioned previously, about 3.3 million of the 32 million in cash is unspent bond proceeds. That has not changed. 1 million is unspent federal ARP funding, and 11 million is restricted for tourism expenditures and beach preservation.
Is the ARP money allocated to projects already?
It is loosely allocated in the budget to the public dock. But that's not something, I mean, it's not codified in any way. It's just kind of the budget.
That's fine.
And we only have half of that money at this point, Jan. We should be getting the second check this fall at some point.
No new storyline on the tourism revenues. Things continue to look good. I will say that we today received notice of our fourth quarter state aid tax payment. And that payment's going to be $1.369 million.
Wow.
So, yeah. Crazy.
It's ever been.
So all tourism revenues and hospitality taxes are running about 40 to 50% ahead of last year across the board. And on project worksheets, we've had no new payment activity, so there's nothing to report on that. So unless someone has any questions, I can be done.
Questions for Debbie? Cool. An easy month. Yeah. Debbie, thank you. Our next, you have behind all the financial schedules in your packet, there's a couple of spreadsheets on projects, and Jan, to your question, projects that are budgeted, forecasted, funded, whether loosely or more so. So we will complete our annual audit, maybe September, October-ish kind of time frame, and annually
They're
that's
not
when.
even coming till October.
Okay, so November. So by the time we get that, we'll close out the year, know what our exact surplus is for our fiscal 22 year. So we don't have any decisions to make tonight, but just to kind of get you to thinking about what we do with this excess money that we have in place. We've put together a list. The first page is budgeted or forecasted over the next 3 years. So those are things you, sorry, you should be familiar with. Our construction drainage projects at 30th and 36, our 41st outfall, Waterway Boulevard path, and you can see all the rest of them listed there. And Jan, to your specific question, you can see the funding source on each one of these items in the fourth column. And then what budget year we have for it. And then on the second page is not budgeted or forecasted over the next 3 years. So these are things that came off our 10-year capital plan that, right now, just a line item essentially, and or a wish list, if you will. So again, not a decision to be made tonight, but would certainly entertain any other projects or items, the other two sides to this, I guess, new items to put on the list, or, if we have the ability to speed a project to the finish line, or there are things that you might want to see sped up. Some of the things take so long from a permitting or bidding and constructing. I mean, again, you think about these drainage projects and how slow it happens from conversation to putting a shovel in the ground. But if there are some things we may have control over, like the Waterway Boulevard path, that we could expedite potentially, depending on our 41st Avenue drainage project. So any initial reactions or thoughts to other projects that you may not see on the list that you might want to see, or things that if you could wave a wand and speed something up, would you put something up higher on the to-do list?
Mr. Mayor, we will be getting some recommendations for additional drainage projects, won't we?
We do, and that's outlined on the non-budgeted. It's a phase 5 drainage, if you will, and that's gonna come out of the comprehensive drainage plan, Jan, that to your point, that's going on, and there's already been 2 that are identified, and we'll need to talk about those, and just Desiree will in a minute. 3 that are identified. So, okay. And no surprise, it'll be a big ticket item, but there's some good grant money out there that we may have some access to.
My only other comment was the Palm Boulevard enhancements.
On the list.
My wish list is that SCDOT would pay for them.
Oh, yeah, well, there's a number of things on here that are DOT cost items. 21st Avenue sidewalk, Palm Boulevard. Jimmy, on here, we have add a paramedic unit to the fire department as an item to be on here. So whether we, some of these that aren't budgeted, Jan, I think to your question, this is not who's paying yet, because I think there are absolutely DOT items on here that need to be paid for. Scott?
Yeah, at one point we talked about maintenance sinking funds for recurring capital projects, whether it's our buildings or what have you. And I think we determined that the 1% allowance, and Debbie, correct me if I'm wrong, that's budgeted, but it's not a sinking fund. It disappears every year if it's not being used. And should we, for our buildings aren't going to get any younger and things of that nature, should we start establishing some kind of a sinking fund so we don't have to go out and borrow to?
Yeah,
for
and
those kinds of
we've
funds?
got that on the unbudgeted, if you will.
Oh, you do?
Scott.
Okay.
Yep, kind of middle of the way down.
I don't have my readers on.
That was a priority to me. And I didn't realize that it was just disappearing every year. I thought we were going to put aside 1% of the insured value of the building. So of course, after the public safety building had all that work done to it, we didn't have to worry about it the first year. But my intention, Scott, was to have that cumulative. So if we had like it happened at
That's
the
pretty
marina,
typical.
if we'd had a fund that we could have gone and gotten those funds to do all the.
Because we
the
know
work.
that we know those expenses will come. They're just lumped. They're
Absolutely,
just
there's no
lumpy.
question
Yeah.
about it.
We may want to add buildings to this as well as basically all of our held assets.
You want to talk about cumulative too?
No, that's what I'm saying. I think we ought to have a cumulative, it'd be nice to fund something initially, but I think every year if we've got some access, we should keep this and keep building up, because we are going to have major capital projects down the road.
Great.
You're sitting in one of them.
Yeah.
City Hall.
No, exactly,
building. Well, and we've had some conversation, Jimmy, I know you and I have, we have $32 million in cash. Good portion of it's spoken for, but like disaster recovery fund, for example, is just shy of 3 million. Do you want to, beefing up that is certainly an item.
Absolutely.
Beach preservation, tourism, there are other places that you could certainly park funds if we felt the need to beef up something. We have pretty healthy capital projects number, but I think anything's on the table from a what do we do standpoint. So other comments, questions? More to come on that for sure. Procurement, we don't have any Desiree capital projects update.
Yes, and Douglas will help me with some of these, as he is the point person in some of these projects. So we'll sort of tag team. That's okay. All right, we'll start with the phase 3 drainage project, 30th and 36th and 41st Avenue outfall. From last month, there was a delay in them starting the work to complete the piping on 30th Avenue up until the end of the road. That is expected to start in the next few weeks. There was a fire, I believe, in the manufacturing company that manufactures the pipe. So there's a delay in getting the pipe in, which is what pushed the schedule a little bit from what we anticipated or last month. But the plan is for them to come back, finish that portion, and then move to 36th Avenue, do the whole project at 36th Avenue, and then come back to 30th to do the installation of the junction box and the box culvert. That essentially that's what requires the road closure. Last month, I reported to you all that we were expecting 2 change orders. One was associated with the temporary relocation of the power pole at 30th. And the other one was related to the installation of a yard inlet to manage some of the storm water that was accumulating at the property next to the project. Those have been executed, so we should be seeing some progress on that when the contractors come back. Regarding 41st Avenue, some progress on permitting. We received some comments from OCRM regarding mitigation for 41st Avenue. So our contractor, Terracon and Thomas and Hutton have developed and put together responses to that. And there's some movement there, at least we hadn't had in a few months. So we're expecting that any day now. We have submitted the grant amendment to the the State Office of Resilience, the office that has granted the city $1.4 million to complete the construction of the 41st Avenue outfall project, so that the extension of the pipe along 41st Avenue could be covered by that grant. I think they have way too much money. They don't know what to do with it. So we're hopeful that we're gonna get, I think it's what, $700,000 that we're anticipating that project to cost, and hopefully that's fully funded by that grant. The next one will be the comprehensive drainage master plan. A lot of the work that was done related to this project this month has been focused on a new grant application that we've been working on with Janie Latham, our grant writer consultant, and Davis and Floyd. The mayor talked about earlier about 3 projects that they've identified as part of their efforts at developing a master plan for the city for drainage. Those 3 projects, Douglas will touch on in just a second. But a lot of the work has been associated with developing more specific design of those projects, cost estimates, and providing Janie the information to complete the grant application. And this is going to be submitted to the Rural Infrastructure Authority. They're receiving about $900 million from ARPA money to fund a lot of the stormwater projects. And our goal and what we're preparing for and working towards is submitting a grant by September 12th. So a lot of our efforts have been focused on that. They have met with, I think they met with a resident, Davis and Floyd did, to start talking about some of the potential mitigation and policy directives that they're going to come back to council with some recommendations to manage stormwater, rainy day flooding, or sunny day flooding. So more on that, but a lot of the work again has been associated with the grant application. So I wanted to spend some time talking about the dune infiltration system, which is the 3 projects that Davis and Floyd has identified as priorities for the city that would be eligible for grant funding and that we're going to be submitting for in September. These projects are located at 6th and 7th and Ocean and 2nd and Charleston. And last time when Davis and Floyd came in here and gave you all an update on their efforts, they spoke a little bit about what it's a pretty innovative solution that hasn't been done in South Carolina, has been done in some North Carolina Bay Area islands effectively. So we are exploring its feasibility for our community. And you can see there's a picture there that's 6th, I believe, 6th Avenue. It would be a similar system in the other, the same system in the other 2 locations. So Douglas, why don't you?
Yeah.
And okay, and we're talking about this. Let me just go back. It's a $6 million, the estimate for the 3 projects is $6 million. When we submit our grant application, if we receive a grant award of 6 million, we're required to match that by 20%, which would be $700,000. So that's not something that we need to decide on today, but something that I'm going to be coming before you all next month for you all to take action so that we can submit a grant application with that commitment.
Thank you, Desiree. The Davis and Floyd, when they did their modeling, they did their mapping of the topography of really the breach inlet side of the island. What they found was there is a trough or a low spot, really, with no drainage infrastructure anywhere near it. And it's specifically between Carolina and Ocean Boulevard. The thought is that that area used to be able to flow towards the ocean, and there wasn't a need for drainage infrastructure there because it would just make its way out, or it was sandy enough that it would make its way out. Over the years, though, that dune is built up and it's now holding water in a low point. The challenge with it is that historically we take the water from the ocean side of the island to the back side of the island, and we have outfalls, as you all know, along the back. That part of the island has such a big dune, and for that ditch or that pipe to go from the front side to the back side, it would be extremely deep, and it's a long run. So it would call for a very expensive, complicated project to get it to the back side of the island. So what they are proposing is to really collect the water along Ocean Boulevard between 6th and 7th Avenue. And instead of going all the way to the back of the island, they would turn and go into the little, well, they're not little, they're 50-foot wide beach access strips. And they would install a system of underground vaults, basically. And that's what this graphic is showing, are these underground chambers. The water would run into those. It would be retained for a while, and then it would have a rock bed below it that would let it penetrate into the ground. There's going to be, their plan is for there to be 2 of them, one at 6th, one at 7th, and then a third one back around 2nd and Carolina, which is another kind of acute area of flooding. Anything else on that? I don't know if there's any questions about it. Like Desiree said, it's kind of an unusual arrangement. It primarily done for cost savings. It's a more cost-effective way of doing it, but there's also the environmental benefit of that. This water's not being discharged directly back into the waters behind us, but it's this is a good graphic that shows this is the bottom 2 are ones that were installed in North Carolina. The bottom right corner is during the installation, and then the primary picture there is after installation. Very similar arrangement. I will say that the starting terrain was much lower. And so you can see how it's kind of a humped up. They had to build up and actually pump the water up to a higher elevation to allow it to percolate. We don't anticipate that having to be done, but they have installed ground water level monitoring devices that'll dictate kind of how much of a hump there would need to be there.
Douglas, isn't this similar to what we saw at the Beach Advocates meeting?
Yes,
Yeah.
that is where, yep,
Okay.
that's exactly that
Yeah.
slide.
Okay.
Douglas, where are they seeing all this? You seeing a lot of water collecting at 6th and 7th? I'm familiar with that Second Ave in Charleston. That does collect a lot and it sits for quite a while, but the
Yeah,
6th and 7th, I'm just not, I get out there in the rain quite a bit. And I don't
So
see a lot.
if you're in that area, and I will say it was happening frequently. Now it's probably been 5 years ago. With major events, it was happening frequently. There was an owner there closer to 6th that they had an older house, ground level. They've kind of tiered up their entire yard to the point where the water would collect to. So it it hasn't happened recently, but it definitely does happen. And their modeling is showing that, it's just a trapped bowl. And there is no real solution other than getting it either to the back or something like this to get it into the ground. So when it happens, it's pretty bad, stays around for a while, particularly in the yards there in that block.
These underground retention, they've been done in projects in Mount Pleasant. In fact, there's one just recently done right there across from Costco. So this is becoming commonplace.
Yeah, I guess in a beach community along dunes, we haven't seen that yet in the state other than in North Carolina. But yes, I mean, I think that even
Publix parking lot is
Publix,
apparently
mhm,
completely covered in these. So,
mhm.
we've had a little bit of concern about, we're very used to dealing with ditches and pipes. This is kind of a new thing for us, but we're getting comfortable that it's, a well-functioning, maintainable system.
Plus it's sitting on 50 or 60 feet of sand. to
Yeah,
dissipate, So,
it's gotta go eventually.
right.
Yeah, I guess environmentally, it filters out any impurities in the water because it is standing there on sand. So it is better for the environment, and because they're buried, you don't even know they're there
Right.
once they're installed.
Yeah, we would suspect that once this went in, you'd really never know it was there.
Yeah.
That's all I have.
All right, that's all we have. All right, second project, underground utility conversion, 21st and Palm. We have everything on hand. It's still on track for after Labor Day. We've sort of giving them a tentative project scheduled of late September to early October. Estimated time for the project to start and finish 1 or 2 weeks. Potentially 1 week, obviously with the weather, that'll be the major determining factor. But we're excited about this project coming to fruition. We've been talking about it for quite some time. So later this year, we should have that completed.
Will there be any road closings with that?
No, they'll be doing a what do they call? They're going to be doing some boring and their detour. There's a detour that's already been approved by SCDOT, but it's just closing one lane, moving people on the other lane. No road closures. Pickleball court construction and outdoor basketball courts. As y'all know, we put it out a couple months ago, didn't get any response. We put it out again last week, giving contractors a little bit more time to submit proposals for it. So we should be expecting those by the end of September. Hopefully council can make a recommendation and approve by your council meeting in September. And we can get moving on that. In the next two, Douglas is kind of the point person on it. So he'll be providing that update on the public dock and green space and 34A.
So on the public green space and dock, we don't have a lot to update. This is, and I don't know if this graphic has changed.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's changed, but it's generally still in that same T configuration. The plan is being kind of modified slowly, but we feel good that it's in a good configuration at this point. So we'll continue to work on that. And we're working right now specifically on the condition of the bulkhead. We've been talking about that, and we're at a little bit of a decision-making point on what to do with that bulkhead. And we will be making a recommendation to you, but we are gathering information on what we think is the best course of action, either to replace the bulkhead or to repair it and tie to it. We're a little anxious that we're going to do a lot of work over the top of a 30-year-old bulkhead and then have to undo that work to repair the bulkhead. So we're just wanting to be we're wanting to be thorough on that before we come back to you.
Is it where's the bulkhead that you're talking about?
Right at the water's edge. It's,
Yeah, but is it the entire area?
yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it's all, so we have replaced really from the restaurant all the way around into the inlet. But from the restaurant down to the ditch, that's a 30-year-old timber bulkhead. It's got a fair amount of rot. We could kind of piecemeal it back. But again, we're just concerned that we do that and then we've built a new green space and attached a new dock to it, and then we have to undo it. So we're just investigating that.
Douglas, does this rendering show the 16 parking spaces?
No, it doesn't. It really, those spaces are unchanged, but there's parking that would go off of this page down in this way. It shows,
Yeah.
6 or 8, maybe 6 or 8 there, but there are additional spaces off the bottom of that page.
What about isn't it taking away parking spots though in that employee lot?
Yes, so there is part of what needs to be done here is there is space that's adjacent to the bulkhead that's currently being used in what we call the employee lot. The thought is that the city would trade property that's adjacent to the dumpster in exchange for that strip along the bulkhead.
Is it equal?
Yeah, yes, the area is equal.
And Douglas, correct me if I'm wrong, but that space that we would be swapping has been currently being used by the restaurant.
That's correct. The city overlaid that lot 6 months ago while the restaurant was under construction. At that time, we put material all over, basically the entire area outside of the area that was under agreement.
Are you talking about further down where?
Yeah, you can't see it.
Yeah, it
there.
would be, it's where the dumpsters are,
Yeah,
right
Okay.
against the curve in the road.
I'm going to ask, can we suspend the rules of order? I think we've got some disagreement here and we gotta hash this out. Is this how this has happened or not happened?
It's a conversation, but I mean, this is conceptual.
Yeah, this is very conceptual at this point. We can take a look at the,
Well, the only reason I'm asking is, and I'm maybe addressing an elephant in the room right now, but we've got some tenants and owners that are kind of shaking their heads like that's not what's happening. And I
need to
well, we can,
suspend the rules, but with a motion.
I would like to make a motion to suspend the rules of order so we could have a conversation about this. And
Second.
Yeah, again, I think this is a staff level conversation that needs to happen.
yeah, we'd be happy to sit down. I see your head nodding. I know that we've met on site.
can we
with-
take a vote, please, on the motion? Or how do we
Motion
we
to
discuss?
suspend the rules of order.
And what are you gonna, when you suspend them, what are you gonna do?
I just want to have a conversation about
Do you
what's,
need a motion for that?
well, I'm asking to have some participation perhaps from the tenant to get us. a
Okay.
vote. Is that okay?
Yep, so we got a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Nay.
So it's my understanding that this is just simple conceptual. We've not voted, we've not firmed up anything. And I remember back in real property, we insisted on the restaurant people to have some input in this as well.
That's correct.
And I don't know if they have or not, or.
And they're here. Can we ask you to? Yeah. That's my request.
Yeah, I mean,
You need to come to the
Come on,
mic
yeah,
and
come up to the
then-
podium, please say who you are and what you represent, and let's just have some open
Dave
conversation.
Lorenz from Islander 71. So yeah, thanks for that. I've been asking to have a conversation about the whole parking, and I think this keeps bleeding into it. And our request is just to sit down and have a plan for this. It seems like, hey, this is kind of what's going to happen. And we're like, well, I mean, I'm hearing adjacent to the area, like it's not specific enough to, moving. It seems like there's a lot of moving parts on there. And we're just saying, let's go down there and like with even maybe the new tenants and council and like, let's get a plan for the parking down there and to solve some of this issue.
I'm Bridget Bushnell. also part of
Can
this
you
group.
please speak into the mic? Yeah.
I'm Bridget Bushnell. I'm also part of this group. We have a specific designated space under lease. And so I just would like to understand if some of that space is going to be eliminated under our lease for the green space and you're proposing to replace it with an adjacent piece, I respectfully ask that you include us in those conversations up to this point. And I know that Chief Cornett said earlier that front beach parking and the tickets have been reduced because of the efficiency of an engineering plan that has been put in place. And so I think if you do a parking engineering plan at the marina, it could also, provide a lot more efficiency in all of this. But given that we have a lease in place, you have to hear that.
So the ask is just to get everybody together, get a plan. We've got a prospective tenant that's going to come down and create some demand. You've got some demand. We've got some demand.
Yes, a lot
Everybody
of
get
confusion.
everybody in a room and try to put the plan together.
Correct.
That would be,
There's not a
how-
lot of clarity right now from us.
And Scott, and that was what we discussed in real property, that we weren't gonna move forward until everybody got involved.
And that has to be a staff level conversation along with the tenant.
No, I understood. I'm trying to, there's just been some tension around this whole topic and all I'm trying to do is facilitate. Maybe we get everybody in the room and get everybody together. Seems to be some calendar issues and try to hash this out so that when the new tenant, if the new tenant's coming in, everybody's on the same page and we've got everybody aligned on what the requirements are, what the asks are, and that we collectively work together with all of the tenants and ourselves to make it happen and document it before it gets implemented, because there are a lot of moving parts and I'll admit, I don't know what they all are, but it doesn't seem like it's all out in the surface with all these moving parts. They're being considered, but I don't think everybody's at the table all at the same time.
Haven't the request for meetings gone out?
Yes, and I'm not gonna get into who's been sent what email. We certainly have documented that since Kelly Messier, do you all remember, she developed a conceptual design that was presented to the city, was discussed several times at the Real Property Committee meeting. That's all on the website. All the other iterations of the conceptual design have been shared and discussed with you all and the tenants. We've had on-site meetings with several of the tenants not at the same time, not all together. We've had multiple conversations about parking here with the staff and with the tenants. And this concept and this plan has been discussed several times. Obviously, it's a very conceptual level. Now we have a potential new operator. We have the shared parking lot that's going to be given to the city. So certainly there's an opportunity here for a comprehensive plan. What the timing of that would be, it depends. Are we going to have a new operator that needs to be involved in those conversations? And I think back to my point of the rules and regulations associated with the use of that lot should be discussed and receive feedback from both tenants. The marina operator, whether that's Brian Berrigan today or Mike Schuler in the future, and certainly our restaurant tenant as well.
And one last thing, just for my clarification, I'm trying to, in my mind, I see documents with exhibits with lines drawn in different places then again, I'm no engineer and I'm not making the drawings, but the drawings and the exhibits in our prospective approval for our second reading don't appear to me to line up with the exhibit that's in the packet here. I don't know if something's going to change or if it's a legal document, and Douglas, maybe it looks like you're going to come up and address that question. But the alignment of all of these documents running around they're causing me confusion. I think they're causing some confusion in the community, and it would just be helpful to have all these things lined up and explained.
So I think I understand what's being said, and what I take their position to be is that there haven't been discussions about having a comprehensive redevelopment of that parking plan. or the parking on the site. I mean, that's been talked about as a long-range goal. How that happens, who gets that done, that's never been crystal clear. And I understand the desire. I think that, you've got multiple tenants. I think each tenant has their own desire to have that project done, but that is not what we were talking about here.
No, and
Specifically
go
here,
ahead.
this is a 17-foot strip that would go into their parking. We were contemplating a 17-foot shift, basically shifting their area down 17 feet. That has been sent to the tenants. That's been discussed. That's been met. We've met on site over that. But I do think what they're saying is there's a bigger problem than just the 17 feet. I mean, you've got 4 different colors on 3 different exhibits. And so I get that there's a bigger issue down there. We did not plan to hold up any of these projects for that to happen. There's so many competing interests, and I don't know that would the timeline to get that done. Quite frankly, I just don't know how that happens.
And I'll just admit, I mean, I'm confused because I see this document and then I see an exhibit that it's probably gonna get approved either later this week or sometime next week. And that seems to me to be in a conflicting picture because of that line going right up to the bulkhead.
Right.
So what I think I'm hearing is this plan would be contingent upon renegotiating that whole and doing
a
a
17-foot shift. That's
Okay,
correct.
but that's not, I don't think that all of us, I didn't know that. And, I don't know if the community knows that. So what we're about ready to do is sign a document that moves the line of the parking lot to the bulkhead and to the water access. And we're counting on that we're going to then go in subsequently and then move that line back. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. Yeah. And in a perfect world, I think that shift would happen now, probably. But there were so many moving parts and with the negotiation that we felt like that was a whole nother kind of ball of wax to interject into an already sticky
So
situation.
just so everybody understands, then if we go ahead and execute these documents where that line now goes up to the bulkhead
No,
or close to the bulkhead.
Very close to the bulkhead.
So we lose
4 feet.
that space and then are going to have to figure out a way to get it back.
well, we had a meeting today with a prospective tenant, and we were discussing this whole thing with the exhibit, because the exhibit that we have currently doesn't include that buffer. And as part of this whole discussion about the lease negotiation, our goal ideally would be to shift that back so that exhibit doesn't show that future public green space. Unfortunately, we haven't had an opportunity to meet with the restaurant tenants on this.
And they're the ones leasing the space.
Correct. Yes. And they would need to be okay with it. They would need to be involved. We've had some preliminary conversations for the past 2 years. We have all those conversations documented. And certainly would want to have that done in conjunction to it. We certainly need to be able to sit down in a room and have these conversations, which we haven't had the opportunity to do yet.
Is that something that can be done this week with the tenants so I mean, how can we get this to an alignment situation?
Absolutely. I think I shared with you all our outreach, the times we've kind of requested feedback, requested the opportunity to sit down and meet. I think that some of the tenants want to have legal representation. That puts a challenge on us because we don't have our current city attorneys not in town. Certainly not advised to meet with legal representation without the city having their own. So I think that that's a challenge, but just as we have been able to in the past, sit with the tenants and at staff level and have these discussions, we can have that anytime, and certainly have made ourselves available to that effect. I think that sometimes those conversations are more productive than conversations with attorneys. That's just my take.
I would agree with that.
When's the attorney coming back?
I believe mid of next week.
Mid of next week.
Yes.
So they're looking for some reconciliation. Is there anything you can say to them that?
We would happy to meet even tomorrow, Friday. We are have made ourselves available to having those conversations and would certainly entertain them
Without attorneys?
without attorneys, correct?
Yeah.
And I think
No?
at the end of
You don't,
these,
that's all you want, you don't want that?
at the end of the day, none of these discussions lead to any final
Right.
any final decisions. They all come to city council. We could certainly have a conversation about the exhibits, the plan, what it looks like today, what it could look like in the future. And certainly our goal is to facilitate those conversations to be productive.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
there really are, I mean, I think we have at least 3 issues with the parking down there that have been somewhat balled together. You know, I hear that the tenants are interested in a comprehensive rework of the entire site. That wouldn't happen in a quick timeline. You have the parking management rules that we talked about earlier. And then you have this, which again, you know, and I'm always guilty of oversimplifying, but this literally is the same area being shifted 17 feet. So the leased area is the same. The amount of area that's being leased is the same. It's just 17 feet farther away from the bulkhead. So I don't think that at a staff level, we intertwined those 3 separate issues into one. We saw them as 3 distinct issues.
And those parking rules you mentioned are just for the shared lot, middle
Correct.
lot.
Right. And that's, I mean, that's actually been what the most recent outreach has been about. Not
That's right.
this,
Not that.
and certainly not an overhaul of the entire parking plan for the site. The recent outreach has been over those rules on the shared lot.
Yeah, the overhaul on the side is, I mean, that's a later project.
Well, I started this conversation around that green space and we're going to give up. At our last meeting, what we were suggesting is that whole area become part of the lease premises of the new tenant. So now we sign this document and we're gonna have to give up 17 feet and get 17 feet.
We would be
proposal-
gaining that 17 feet in
Yeah.
exchange
For some
for
other
17 feet
17 feet.
by the
Yeah.
dumpster, right?
And that he doesn't have to do that necessarily. I'm not saying that he wouldn't or anything. I'm just saying that now becomes part of the lease premises, according to our last meeting.
That's correct.
And another thought that we briefly discussed at our last meeting is if the city takes control over the shared lot, rather than having that park go all the way down to 41st, do we want to shift it? We would have more flexibility and control over the other lot. I think obviously parking is at a premium anywhere, private, you know, the private employee lot, the shared parking lots. I think we need to come up with something that balances both the desires of the community to have a public green space and also managing or having enough space to do a fairly, you know, an efficient parking lot that maximizes the space, which I think was part of the idea of stopping that at that T, creating essentially a T along the bulkhead for the green space, putting more money down the pier, spending more money down at the floating dock, enhancing that to a 16-foot pier with benches and swings that we can bring a lot of the public activity down to the water and maybe reduce the footprint of what that green space would look like while still providing it. So that's another option. I mean, you can just either do, you know, continue to attempt to do the entire length. No, just flip it, you know, just you would do that on the other side. Again, this is very conceptual because there are a lot of things that are still, you know, being, you know, moving along. Obviously the desire, which I think the city would be supportive of a comprehensive parking plan. When that happens, how quickly we can get that done. And obviously with new partners and potential new partners involved would be complicated, but I think we're talking about different issues that are obviously being convoluted together because they're complicated. So all that to say that we certainly want to get feedback from them.
What I hear is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, because this is just what I'm hearing here, is that we, the city, have been talking with the prospective new marina tenant about this space.
Well, he's aware of the plan, just like we all are aware that there's a plan for some green space and a overhaul of a public dock.
Okay.
Now, there
But
have been
there's-
conversations with both tenants.
Okay, but the restaurant that owns that is the tenant now in that space is concerned that they haven't been included. Now, I don't know whether that's true or not. But that's sort of what I'm hearing that's going on here. And I think it's really, I mean, this is something that needs to be settled among the parties and partly with us because of that map that came out last time. In terms of responsibility and I don't
So
know
what
where
do
we
we-
go.
so
I don't
what
know
do
where
we
we
do?
go from here.
Well, I think we need to have an open conversation with the whole parties involved. Try to come to some sort of reconciliation with everybody.
Well, at the staff level, we would welcome the opportunity to have a sit down conversation with our partners to answer questions, make sure we're all on the same page, bring that back to you all. Obviously, we don't decide anything at those meetings, all of that comes before you all. Unless we are able to sit down in a room and have these conversations, this is what happens. We have an awkward back and forth without an opportunity to fully flesh out some of these issues. We certainly want to have that opportunity. Unfortunately, there have been some threats of litigation, attorneys involved that unfortunately complicate the issue. These are very simple conversations that we could be having and certainly welcome the opportunity to do so.
So we're reaching out our hand. Right?
Yeah, they're here. I'm happy to have a conversation with them after the meeting so that we can coordinate that
Yes,
conversation.
And an offer was put out. We could have met last Friday at 10:30 or 2 p.m. or yesterday, Monday at 10 a.m. That was short notice. That was given on August the 4th. And not all of our parties were available at that time. And yes, we have requested to have our attorney present at these meetings. That's a simple request.
So we won't then not be able to meet until after August 16th.
Is that a problem?
Well, I'm not sure for the timeline. We don't have an attorney to be representing us in those conversations until
Okay.
August 16th.
So can we get on your calendar after that point?
Absolutely.
Are there any decisions to be made regarding this before that date?
Street space.
On the green space? No.
On the parking?
Well, I think the documents that are going to be proposed for approval are moving the line around a bit that move that right to the bulkhead. So there are impacts to those lot lines, it appears. And again, I'm rudimentary. I'm just looking at the exhibits from my perspective that may or may not impact you. And so I would advise you to look at those exhibits and see if they're going to impact you or not. They're certainly going to impact our green space. So that's a city issue. If I'm reading that right.
Yeah, I mean, this exhibit has absolutely nothing to do with what's in the second reading.
Well, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, the second reading exhibit has the lines on all of that to the bulkhead are in the lot, not green
Agreed.
space. Yeah.
This is on a chalkboard. I mean, this is a concept that is nowhere near putting a shovel in the ground. And in all fairness, this is not the first time the restaurant folks have heard about this 11, 17-foot strip. This has been a conversation. It's been staked out. It's been put on the ground on property that we've had conversations for at least a year on this topic, Scott.
Philip, I mean, yes, I understand that. I'm looking at it more from the if I was reading that right, that exhibit, it doesn't have anything to do with the restaurants per se. It's more the exhibit is taking over the green space that we've been looking at for the last several months. Okay, that's news to me.
Okay.
All right.
Douglas, last project.
Wasn't that enough?
Oh, that was pretty good. Thank you, Doug.
so this is out for bid, the 34A beach access boardwalk and sidewalk. And I think it's this Friday. We'll have bids back. So hopefully we're going to have a good response and we'll have prices for you to consider at your potentially their
At
next
the end
meeting
of- Yeah, hopefully if we get good bids back.
at your
we should
council
be-
meeting. yeah.
At your August meeting, yes.
Yeah, this is a great
And with an easy.
legislative report. They're out of session, so there's nothing to report to that.
So motion to adjourn?
Second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Off record at